Chapter 722, Rong Yun's Bias. 9. Su Zian opened the letter and very carefully scanned it again. In the end, he angrily threw the letter down on the table. The words were written very clearly. Su Luo was not Su Zian's daughter. From the very beginning, his daughter had been switched by someone. This was simply. The veins on Su Zian's forehead stuck out and were about to explode. His complexion became ashen. He was so angry that his fist smashed down on the table. Immediately, a fist-sized hole appeared on the long table. It could clearly be seen that Su Zian was infuriated till he became nearly insane. If this news had come earlier, he would have already expelled Su Luo from the Su family. How could he have allowed her to stay free and easy until now? However, just when she and the Jade Lakes Fairy were competing for the position of becoming Grandmaster Rong Yun's disciple, and just when Su Luo had passed the first round, it appeared. What should he do? Su Zian was so angry that he paced back and forth inside the room. He could not suppress it anymore. Anything that could be smashed inside the room were smashed to pieces by him until nothing was left. Speaking of Su Luo, after returning to her wisteria courtyard, she had not come out even once. As a result, she did not know about Su Zian's current state. At this moment, she was brooding over the question of the second round of examination. Grandmaster Rong Yun did not leak out a word. So where should she actually start? Su Luo's hugged the little divine dragon in her arms and poked his head unhappily. You tell me, what topic would Grandmaster Rong Yun test on? The one response to her question was the little divine dragon's blank yet innocent little face. Su Luo sighed. Forget it. Asking you is useless. However, it's truly strange. Why would Grandmaster Rong Yun treat you so well? Could it be that he was acquainted with your old man? The little divine dragon shook his head, expressing that he didn't know. Thinking of the old divine dragon, Su Luo let out a snort. That old bastard. At the time, he lied that if she had broken the jade at any time, the shadow image he left on this continent would come to save her. It just so happened to be useless at the crucial moment. If it was not for Grandmaster Rong Yun's appearance, she and the little divine dragon would already be dead by now. Just when Su Luo was sitting cross-legged on the bed and sighed from being bored to death, a clear knocking noise came from the windows. Su Luo's heart moved. Who? Me. Bei Chenying's voice came from the outside. Come in to speak, Su Luo said, lowering her voice. After all, it was already midnight. Waking up others was not good. Bei Chenying jumped in from the window. Still haven't spoken, but seeing his face that was full of smiles, it was as if when he entered, the entire room was sprinkled full of sunlight. Su Luo's heart sighed with sorrow. She really wished that he would be this optimistic and cheerful for his whole life. Sister-in-law. Bei Chenying beamingly approached Su Luo. Afterwards, he stuffed a sack full of things into her arms. Su Luo hadn't even returned to her senses before another sound came from outside the window. Sister-in-law. Lan Xian jumped inside and similarly stuffed a sack of things into her arms. Not waiting for Su Luo to ask a question, An Yiming, also carrying a sack of things, stuffed it into Su Luo's arms. However, Su Luo's arms could not hold anymore, so he could only place them on the floor. You guys, this is... A huge question mark hung on top of Su Luo's forehead. Bei Chenying acted as the representative and was the first to speak. Sister-in-law, just now, we went to find Apothecary Long to drink some wine. We conveniently got Apothecary Long drunk. Lan Xian interrupted. Apothecary Long, after drinking wine, leaked out the test questions for the exam 10 days from now. An Yiming continued. Bei Chenying pointed at the 3 sacks in front of Su Luo. 10 days from now, Grandmaster Rong Yun will test you on an apothecary's knowledge and theory. Apothecary Long had said that sister-in-law is only an elementary apothecary and can only act as cannon fodder. Lan Xian pointed at the sacks and added an explanation. That's why we took advantage of Apothecary Long becoming drunk. We coaxed him into bringing out the books that Grandmaster Rong Yun had given to him at that time to review. Chapter 723 Rong Yun's Bias. 10. In the end, An Yiming summed it up in one sentence. All the books are here. Sister-in-law, you must make a hasty last-minute effort to quickly memorize these books. "We are going now." Just as he finished speaking, they immediately dispersed in a confusing manner and disappeared with incomparable speed. Seeing them come and disappear without a trace, Su Luo suddenly did not know whether to laugh or cry. After Su Luo had opened the 3 sacks and stacked the books up on top of each other, she was simply about to cry. "What the heck do you call this? So many books." When these damned books were stacked up, they actually were the same height as her. To ask her to finish reading all these books within 10 days? She would also need to memorize it? Might as well take a knife to directly kill her to forget about it. No wonder Bei Chening and the 3 of them slipped away faster than a rabbit. It seemed that they also knew this was forcing her to do something extremely difficult. "Oh woo, oh woo," the little divine dragon cutely laid at Su Luo's feet. As if he felt Su Luo's gloomy mood, at this moment, he seemed especially cute. Afterwards, he meekly took out a crystal stone from the brocade pouch around his neck and gave it to Su Luo. This was a piece of purple-colored crystal stone. He had always especially treasured it. Now, he actually specifically took it out to give it to Su Luo. How considerate of him, her treasured darling. Su Luo, with one move, hugged the little divine dragon to her and rubbed his little head. "Oh woo, oh woo," the little divine dragon insisted on giving Su Luo the purple-colored crystal stone. Su Luo declined a few times without success. However, right now, she also did not have a use for the purple-colored crystal stone. As a result, she placed it inside her space. Su Luo, holding the little divine dragon, was resigned to her fate. She was about to pick up a book to read, when suddenly, Su Luo felt her brain aching from whiplash. In the beginning, it was only a slight throbbing pain. Afterwards, it slowly intensified and sharply intensified. Until the end, even Su Luo's type of strong perseverance nearly crumbled. Su Luo felt a burst of darkness come from an attack, and she sunk into darkness that was like a pool of mud. When Su Luo woke up, it was already the early morning of the 2nd day. When her drowsy eyes opened, Su Luo realized that something was different about her body. When she probed her space, unexpectedly, she discovered that her space had undergone a huge transformation. It was not merely that her space had become bigger. Rather, it was time that changed. Su Luo discovered that the time in her space was faster than time in reality by 10-fold. This astonishing discovery simply made her wild with joy. What did she lack the most right now? It was time. Ask her to finish reading that pile of books as tall as her in 10 days. It was absolutely impossible. However, after the time in her space had sped up, she actually had an equivalent to 100 days of time. She believed that based on her ability to remember and not forget, plus hard work, there was still a glimmer of hope for her to finish reading these books. Only, this space didn't get upgraded earlier or later. Why did it get upgraded at a time when she urgently needed it the most? Suddenly, Su Luo's eyes lit up. She remembered. Before, because the little divine dragon had given her the purple-colored crystal stone, and she, in passing, placed it in her space. Just because of this, the characteristics of her space had transformed. Thinking up to here, Su Luo couldn't help but to start to laugh heartily. That piece of crystal stone was actually the one obtained from the Li family. At that time, the little divine dragon simply did not swallow it. It was because he knew that right now, he could not bear the frantic surge of the spirit energy from a purple-colored crystal stone. So, at that time he had tossed in a green-colored crystal stone that Su Luo had given him as a backup and not the purple-colored crystal stone. If Li Yaoyao knew that her family's purple-colored crystal stone actually was such a huge help to Su Luo, don't know if she would fall down after being angered until she went insane. Su Luo happily lifted up the little divine dragon and kissed him. "Good child. Quickly go back inside the space to cultivate." The time inside her space was effective for Su Luo. Naturally, it was also effective for the little divine dragon. Moreover, the cultivation speed inside was much faster. Probably, very quickly, the master and servant duo would become strong. Chapter 724, Second Round of the Match, 1. Even though Su Luo had an extra 100 days of time, but with regards to her, it was still not enough time. After all, when these knowledge were stacked together, they were as tall as her. It's also not like reading a novel that could be read very quickly. These books, each and every one of them. With regards to Su Luo, this greenhorn who just entered apothecary studies, was too obscure to understand. But, no matter what needed to be memorized still needed to be memorized. What needed to be comprehended still needed to be comprehended. Su Luo picked up a book and discovered it was the analysis and prescription of hundreds of types of herbal medicinal plants. Inside, there was a drawing of every kind of herbal medicinal plants. It seemed intuitive and clear. On the side was also a long paragraph of introduction in small letters. Since Su Luo had already entered the competition, then she would absolutely not be easily defeated. Need to memorize it? Then she'll just memorize it. A really thick book with more than 100 pages. With regards to Su Luo, this kind of person that lacked a good foundation, a child merely depending on memorization, so to speak, was still very difficult. Moreover, not only did Su Luo need to skim it and recite it, she still needed to master the subject and its surrounding areas. In just such a short time of 10 days, she needed to finish walking the path that other people took 10 years to complete. The difficulties within was simply too hard to imagine. Even with Su Luo's highly retentive memory that wouldn't forget, memorizing things very quickly, she still had to work hard for an entire night. To stubbornly memorize the entire book, word by word of the analysis and prescribing of hundreds types of herbal medicinal plants the second day, Su Luo, with 2 black circles around her eyes, once again began to memorize the second book, the methods to enter the doorway to be an intermediate apothecary. The third day, the drowsy Su Luo tried to shake her head and mind to memorize the third book, the analysis of regions with uncommon medicinal plants, the fourth day. Even though Su Luo was extremely tired, but every day, she would memorize a book no matter what happened. Through several tens of days of memorization, Su Luo's brain had already turned into paste, so dizzy and confused, as if at any time, her brain would explode. Memorizing later on, Su Luo vomited from memorizing. But she continued memorized while vomiting. Su Luo was absorbing each and every one of those books completely. In the wake of the books piling up by her feet becoming more and more, the books that were originally put in her space became less and less. Su Luo, since the beginning, had tossed the book aside after memorizing it, until later when Su Luo was buried in an ocean of books. Until the last day, when Su Luo wobbled memorized the last sentence. Her entire body was so tired as to be paralyzed in her space, and she directly lost consciousness, going to sleep. Tired, too tired. It must be made aware that these books were not just any ordinary books. Every one of them was as thick as the ocean. All were densely packed with words. Also, fortunately, after Su Luo used the strength of her space, the regions of her brain opened up. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to complete this task. Everyone believed that Su Luo's theoretical knowledge had stayed at the elementary apothecary level. In fact, Su Luo's theoretical knowledge, right now, had completely turned over a new leaf. Outside, she merely endured 10 days, but Su Luo, in her space, had already passed 100 days. During these 100 days, besides Su Luo memorizing, she still memorized. She stubbornly stuffed those 100 books into her head, stuffed until it was completely full. It was as if just one extra word would make her brain overflow. Now, who dared to say the word book in front of her? She would absolutely spit out blood that would cover his entire face. Because she really felt injured from memorizing. Her entire brain had become paste. Her pupils looked like a hypnotic spiral. In the throne room, Grandmaster Rong Yun was dressed in an elegant robe. On the Chinese-style robe was embroidered several light and pure bamboos with silver thread. He was graceful, pure, and cold with jet-black eyes that were shining with obsidian-like light. He looked down with a profoundly mysterious gaze. He sat high up in the master position, even though he didn't speak nor move, but his entire body issued an exceptionally lofty, sharp aura. It made other people who saw him feel inferior. The Jade Lakesley family, like always, were separated from others, standing in their place firmly. Chapter 725. Second round of the match, 2. The Jade Lake's fairy was dressed in a purple gown with roses and had an unmatched, beautiful complexion. She had a shallow smile on her face while standing alone, like a fairy who came to the human world, beyond noble. Time passed by in minutes and seconds. Seeing that the time was no longer early, Su Luo, as the lead, unexpectedly still hadn't arrived yet. Momentarily, everyone inevitably started to talk. Where is Su family's daughter by a concubine? Why is it that she still hasn't come? Can't be that she is automatically forfeiting, right? After all, she is merely only at the level of an elementary apothecary. It may still be possible. The first round was because of her good luck. But this second round is truly an examination to test her knowledge. How could she, as a lowly, insignificant elementary apothecary, compete with the Jade Lake's fairy? That's right. The Jade Lake's fairy is already an advanced apothecary. Su family's daughter by a concubine must be afraid and doesn't dare to come. For a moment, everyone's tongue was wagging. The situation was extremely not beneficial to Su Luo. The overwhelming majority of the people wanted Su Luo to forfeit. Apothecary Long was so anxious that he stood on his tiptoes, constantly peering outside. However, no matter how much he peered around, Su Luo's silhouette still hadn't appeared in his line of sight. Apothecary Long was secretly worried in his heart. This damned girl, at the most critical moment, where did she go? Last time, she was also late. If she was late again this time, then it's truly. Apothecary Long felt that if he was Grandmaster Rong Yun, then he would also be mad. The Jade Lakesley family, seeing this, couldn't help but be secretly pleased. It seems like this loathsome girl really does had some self-knowledge. She knew she couldn't compete, therefore, she voluntarily forfeited. This was also something that could be understood. After all, forfeiting was much better than losing face at the scene. Li Aoqiong coldly smiled, deliberately taunted and said, Su family's, that girl, has such a grand style, making Grandmaster Rong Yun and His Majesty wait here for her. Similarly, Li Yaoxiang also repeatedly sneered. Looks like this girl is automatically forfeiting. However, this is also right. How could she, as an elementary apothecary, compete with our family's Yao Yao? Apothecary Long sent an impatient glare towards Li Yaoxiang. If your family's Yao Yao is so great, how is it that she didn't even win the first round? These words were indeed sharp, directly pointing out the critical point. Li Yaoxiang was immediately choked off. His complexion flushed red, and he loudly blurted out, That's because a person lean. Touching on Grandmaster Rong Yun's deep eyes smiling with not quite a smile, Li Yaoxiang's heart trembled, gloomily turning his face away. If he dared to shout out that Grandmaster Rong Yun was partial at the scene, then, this round of examination, Li Yaoyao wouldn't need to take it. She would have to directly packed up and been sent home. But Li Aoqiang continued and said, Su Luo is not coming. We shouldn't let Grandmaster Rong Yun and His Majesty wait around in vain, right? He deliberately pointed out these two. The reason was to arouse everyone's fury. As expected, with his reminder, a lot of bureaucrats in Li family's faction stepped forward one by one to talk to the emperor. Your Majesty, since Su family's daughter by a concubine has automatically forfeited, this round ought to be concluded, right? Even if she comes, it is also her having disrespected your Majesty and Grandmaster Rong Yun. This kind of disciple, what's the use of having? The Jade Lake's fairy is hundreds of fold better than her. She was able to pass the first round because of luck. Otherwise, she would have already been eliminated. As a result, after hearing these negative voices, Emperor Jing hesitated. His gaze looked towards Grandmaster Rong Yun. Grandmaster Rong Yun's eyes were deep and hidden. No one could make out a hint of his mood from that indifferent expression on his face. Apothecary Long gave two humps. Doesn't the Jade Lakesley family have a lot of confidence in Li Yaoyao? What? You guys are just this afraid of competing with Luo girl. Who's afraid? Li Yaoxiang gave a furious glare at Apothecary Long, who always opposed Jade Lakesley family. Oh, if you guys are not afraid, why must you try to forcefully cancel her qualifications to compete? Isn't because you guys are afraid Li Yaoyao would be defeated by Su Luo? Chapter 726, Second Round of the Match, 3, Apothecary Long. not saving any sentiments nor face, directly pointed at Li Yaoxiang's nose and cursed. You this. Li Yaoxiang coldly snorted several times. This man won't lower himself to your kind of level. This man is also disinclined to lower himself to your level. Apothecary Long flung his sleeves, arrogantly and unyieldingly flinging his sleeves. Li Yaoxiang was simply nearly infuriated to death by Apothecary Long's attitude. However, the opponent was Grandmaster Rong Yun's disciple. Therefore, there was nothing Li Yaoxiang could do to Apothecary Long. Just at this moment, from outside, came the voice of a court eunuch. She came. Miss Su came. As a result, an exquisite, luxurious litter that was sheltered and sealed tightly was directly carried into the throne room. Even the Empress did not have the qualifications to sit in a litter and be carried into the throne room. This allowed Su Luo to be first to do so. One could only see the exquisite litter slowly being set down in the throne room. There were 3 people lifting the litter. The person in front was Bai Qining. The 2 people behind were Lan Xian and Anya Ming, able to get the 3 major families' direct lines core from the younger generation to come and carry a litter. This was simply the most luxurious lineup in history. Lowering the litter, Bai Qining lifted open the litter's curtain. He very carefully and solemnly opened his voice, yelling, "Sister-in-law, wake up. We have arrived." After 3 calls in a row, there was only the sound of even breathing from within the litter. Apart from this, there was no other response. Bai Qining couldn't help but be somewhat helplessly exasperated. He anxiously pulled at his hair, then looked at Lan Xian and Anya Ming with a request for help. The 2 people behind him directly spread out their hands, shaking their heads, expressing they sympathized but couldn't help. For these 10 days straight, they took turns guarding Su Luo outside her room. So, they were really clear on how hard she had worked these days. Until the 10th day, they had already gotten together earlier and planned to accompany Su Luo to the throne room. After all, they could give a show of strength and power, right? However, what made them depressed was, they had just gone in and discovered that Su Luo, this girl, was neatly dressed, sleeping soundly on the ground. Very possibly, she had slept a night away in this posture. Moreover, her face looked exhausted and tired, making them unable to bear to wake her up. Then, they looked at those piles of books that almost buried Su Luo's entire body, and everyone became silent. These books, not possible, right? Lan Xian's eyes were opened wide from shock. Every one of these books is thicker than a brick, all with densely packed words. Could sister-in-law have memorized all of it? Bai Qining was so shocked that it took a long time for him to return to his senses. 10 days, this many books, a little difficult, right? Anya Ming said, without sounding very certain. How was it only a little difficult? In any case, even if Anya Ming was given 100-fold of time, he still might not have memorized it all. The 3 people seeing this gave each other a mutual glance with a touch of heartache, with Bai Qining personally stepping forward to wake her up. But, no matter how they called her, Su Luo, this girl, was dead asleep, completely unable to wake up. The exam is about to start, sister-in-law is still sleeping. No matter how we call, she won't wake up. What to do? The 3 people looked at each other in dismay. They felt extremely helpless. Seeing the time, she was about to be late again. Therefore, they decided to first move the person over to the throne room, then discuss it. Consequently, it led to the appearance of that scene from before. The litter was directly carried into the throne room. If this was replaced with someone else, wouldn't they have been beaten to death by the Imperial Guards? But, precisely because of these 3, with each of their backgrounds being extremely huge, the Imperial Guards in front of them were tantamount to being decorations. This moment, inside the Great Hall, everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at that purple-colored, delicate litter, then looked at each other in dismay. This daughter of a concubine from Su family was really extremely daring. Grandmaster Rong Yun and His Majesty were both waiting for her. In spite of everything, she still had the guts to sleep while being carried in. In this area of silence, Bai Qining awkwardly coughed twice and rubbed his nose. Chapter 727. Second round of the match, 4. He somewhat embarrassedly asked for help from Grandmaster Rong Yun. Great Master, I reckon Luo Luo was memorizing the books and passed out from memorizing, you see? The corner of Grandmaster Rong Yun's mouth pursed slightly. Didn't see what he did, only saw his wide robe brush by. A cool breeze rapidly shot towards the litter's curtain. Bang, a fierce sound echoed. The delicate litter immediately disintegrated into pieces. Su Luo, who was originally lying down in the litter, sensed danger, and she abruptly sat up. Su Luo, in the next instant, jumped up fiercely and arranged herself in a warlike fighting stance. However, she discovered that all around her was dreadfully quiet. Su Luo slowly opened her eyes but discovered she was surrounded by countless eyes. In the depths of pair after pairs of eyes was the inverted image of her comical actions. Every one of them was staring at her, as if watching an idiot. Even the often thick-skinned Su Luo also couldn't help but feel awkward. She clearly coughed twice. That fighting stance very naturally and flowingly transformed into the movements of making one's salutations. She bent her knees slightly, making her salutations to Grandmaster Rong Yun and Emperor Jing. What kind of eyesight did second child have to actually fall for this loathsome girl whose face was full of traces of sleep? The corner of Emperor Jing's mouth twitched in displeasure, turning his face away. However, Grandmaster Rong Yun did not get angry. A touch of interest flashed across that pair of always indifferent eyes that was like clouds. However, it flashed by very quickly, and others were unaware of it. Awake? This was the first sentence Grandmaster Rong Yun had said directly to Su Luo since they first met. Su Luo somewhat awkwardly nodded her head. Immediately, she quickly tidied up her messy hair. It was also the fault of Bei Qining in them. Wherefore would boys be this careful? At the time, no matter how much they called, they couldn't wake up Su Luo. They were worried, so they just found a litter and carried her over in a rush. They also didn't think to dress and groom her well. Under Su Luo's glare, those three big boys looked at each other in dismay, mutually shifting the blame to each other. The Jade Lake's fairy, seeing them making fun of each other and acting as if nobody else was there, resentful rays of light flashed through her eyes. She was the person who grew up with Bei Qining and them. But why? Now Bei Qining and them always favored Su Luo, this loathsome girl, whereas they treated her like air. The Jade Lake's fairy cast Su Luo a mocking glance. Should we still first set aside time for Miss Su to groom herself? No one would have anticipated that Grandmaster Rong Yun would suddenly open his mouth to say, "After a stick of incense, this test will officially begin." In other words, there was still a stick of incense worth of time to make preparations? If these words were said in ordinary times, it was absolutely the most commonly said sentence. But after the Jade Lake's fairy provoked Su Luo, Grandmaster Rong Yun provided this sentence. The meaning within provided food for thought. Many thanks to Great Master. Su Luo smiled sweetly, then sent a provoking glance to the Jade Lake's fairy. Li Yaoyao's fists clenched tightly at her side. What was up with Grandmaster Rong Yun? Was it really because of love for the little divine dragon to love her? As a result, he was treating Su Luo, that loathsome girl, so good? An incense stick of time was enough time for Su Luo to return to the throne room in high spirits. Now, in the center of the throne room, 2 desks were arranged. Su Luo and the Jade Lake's fairy each had 1 desk. Apothecary Long placed the exam papers down one by one. Once Su Luo received the exam papers, she swept a glance at it from top to bottom. She discovered that these topics were indeed covered among that pile of books. Only, the stuff she memorized was simply too much. Su Luo found that she was somewhat mixed up. The Jade Lake's fairy took a furtive glance at Su Luo, and seeing that her long, shapely brows were wrinkled tightly, a cold laugh streaked across her heart. These theories and knowledge spanned from intermediate apothecary to elite apothecary training. Su Luo was merely a lowly little elementary apothecary and was separated by a distance of 54,000 kilometers from these knowledge. Chapter 728. The competition continues. 1. Don't even mention solving the problem. Very likely, just seeing the question, she won't be able to understand it. Jade Lake's fairy cast a disdainful glance at Su Luo. She sneered secretly inside her heart, then lowered her head to answer the questions. She quickly wrote the words with swift brush strokes, in order to cause more psychological pressure for Su Luo. At this time, Su Luo really did feel somewhat pressured. From top to bottom, Su Luo specifically picked out the topics she could answer and did those first. After that, looking at the last 3 topics, she was stunned. She was a little bit familiar with these questions. Dragon tongue grass, wishful fragrant orchid, and 21 other similar types of herbal medicine mixed together. After simmering and by boiling for 4 hours, place it in. What was it placed in? This was clearly in the category of advanced apothecary knowledge. Su Luo still remembered that the previous night, she even memorized this. Only, at that time, she was too tired, with her entire brain swelling up. So, what she remembered was somewhat fuzzy. Out of the corner of Su Luo's eye, she looked towards the Jade Lakes ferry. At this time, she was riding at a tremendously fast speed. The examination paper before her, that was originally blank and white, was now densely packed with finely written work in small, regular script. It appeared exceedingly refined. What to do? Could it be that she was really going to lose to her? Su Luo grabbed at her hair in distress. At this time, the Jade Lakes fairy just so happened to raise her head and look towards Su Luo. Seeing Su Luo's tagging ear and scratching cheek appearance, traces of a cynical look flashed through her eyes. Too obscure. She, Su Luo, was actually looked down upon. Su Luo came across the Jade Lakes fairy disdainful gaze, and her thoughts suddenly got fired up. She definitely would not be looked down by that woman. In the throne room, there was a distance of 2 meters between Su Luo's and the Jade Lakes fairy's 2 tables. With them in the center, the surrounding 5 meters were all cleared out. Now, the people standing outside the 5-meter range were full of interest as they watched the 2 people answering questions. The Jade Lakes fairy was completely concentrating on writing at a tremendous speed. She was in glowing spirits and her face was full of self-confidence. In contrast, Su Luo was tagging her ear 1 minute, then scratching her cheek another minute. Then, another moment, she was looking to the east and then west of her. At one glance, one could tell that this child could not answer the question. Seeing Su Luo looking like this, the corner of Li Aoqiong's mouth raised to form a sneer. He laughed coldly. The ugly duckling actually dares to compete with a swan? Simply overestimating one's abilities. Seeing Su Luo like this, Bai Qining really wanted to fly up there to take her place. Now, hearing the mockery in what Li Aoqiong said, immediately, he became furious. His long arm fished around and grabbed hold of Li Aoqiong's collar, lifting him off the ground. Who is the ugly duckling and who is the white swan? If you don't know how to talk, then just shut your mouth. Finished speaking, he threw Li Aoqiong to the side in passing. That agile movement and that cold, imposing manner was simply too cool. Li Aoqiong, who was so casually picked up then randomly cast aside, almost fell down. Originally, he was not this weak. It was more accurate to say that originally, among the younger generation, he was either number 1 or number 2. Therefore, he usually considered himself to be an important person who led. Yet, right now, he was actually lifted up and cast aside by Baichen family's loathsome boy. He had just lost a lot of face. At this time, many people used strange gazes to look at the staggering Li Aoqiong. The surroundings were quiet and silent. In this noiseless silence, the many pairs of eyes with strange expressions nearly made Li Aoqiong go insane. What are you looking at? Careful, or I'll dig all of your eyes out. Li Aoqiong bellowed from being flustered. The crowd of civil and military officials all silently turned their faces away. But their hearts, with regards to this young master from the Jade Lakesley family, who usually showed off his military strength, observed that he had certainly dropped a level. At this moment, Li Aoqiong's eyes were shooting flames as he glared at Bai Qining. However, Bai Qin, this child, had his face lifted in silent provocation. What? Want to fight? The current Li Aoqiong was so weak that he could deal with him with just a fingertip. Li Aoqiong gritted his back teeth. The veins on his forehead were protruding, ready to explode. The hands at his side were clenched tightly into fists. But ultimately, he still turned his face away in indignation. Li Yaoxiong had originally wanted to vent Li Yaoxiong's anger for him. Chapter 729. The competition continues, too, but, seeing the beaming elder Beichen standing by Beichen Ying's side, his complexion became ashen, and just like Li Yaoxiong, he turned his face away. With skill not as good as theirs, what could they do? Li Yaoxiong glared at Su Luo with a raging inferno burning in his eyes. He wished he could rush up to skin her alive and pull out all of her tendons. If it wasn't for this loathsome girl, how could he have ended up in his current disgraceful state? As if at this moment, Su Luo had the time to care if Li Yaoxiong was angry. She was biting on her brush. She'd thought for quite a while, but still could not recall the answers to the last 3 questions. She remembered that at that time, she was memorizing until it became hazy. Finally exhausted, she fell asleep. Oh, managing to catch the insight that flashed through her brain, Su Luo's eyes suddenly lit up. She remembered that time when she was memorizing the books. She had put away all of them. Now, they were all lying quietly and still inside her space. Her soul could enter her space. Oh, was there a more open method of cheating than this? This definitely was the most awesome way to cheat on Earth. Those that depended on mobile phones to pass the answers around or whatnot were simply pathetic. Come on, you can't deny it. Saying to do it, then just do it. Su Luo used one hand to support her forehead and pretended to doze off. Her soul had long since run into her space and was busily opening books. Fortunately, she had already flipped through all of these books. Very quickly, Su Luo found the answer she wanted. Consequently, Su Luo, who had found the answer, lowered her head and wrote at a tremendous speed. With swishing swift brush strokes, she started to write. With a wave of her brush, she continued. Then again, in passing, her brush stopped. One question was completed. When the Jade Lakes Fairy, who had been paying close attention to Su Luo since the start, saw her finish one question so quickly, she couldn't help but to be somewhat distracted. Just a moment ago, she had clearly seen this loathsome girl dozing off. In her heart, she was feeling disdainful. Then, unexpectedly, Su Luo sat up and filled the entire empty space for that question. She must have concocted a cock-and-bull story. For sure. The Jade Lakes Fairy thought like this in her heart. However, what made her depressed was that, after she was finished answering the question, Su Luo, that loathsome girl, actually supported her forehead with one hand and started to doze off again. After dozing for a moment, she would suddenly sit up again and begin to write with swift brush sounds at a tremendous speed. It was like, when she was dozing off, an extremely strong expert would give her the correct answer in her dream. At this time, it was not just Jade Lake's Fairy. Even the spectators in the surrounding circle were all confounded by Su Luo's cramping-like actions. However, how could they possibly know that Su Luo was actually a space system mage? Furthermore, that she would so openly plagiarize in front of everyone? At this time, the Jade Lakes Fairy only had one final question left. But this question was actually extremely difficult. It could be said that only an elite apothecary had a grasp on this knowledge. As an advanced apothecary, she felt this was a strenuous question that was to be expected. But she was also secretly rejoicing in her heart. At first, in order to get close to Grandmaster Rong Yun, she had memorized countless volumes of uninteresting and cryptic books on apothecary theory and knowledge. Although at that time, she did not get to use it. Now, this just so happened to be in a favorable position to use her skills. However, Su Luo, that insignificant lowly elementary apothecary, how could she possibly understand an elite apothecary's theoretical knowledge? This time, she was going to win for sure. The Jade Lakes Fairy swept a disdainful glance at Su Luo. Afterwards, she lowered her head and began to write. At this time, Su Luo similarly also had one huge question left. This question involved many points of knowledge, from drug theory, medicinal herbs to the techniques of refining medicines. The control of heat using fire required all kinds of accuracy and data. Under the attentive gazes of so many pairs of eyes, Su Luo was running in and out of her space. While flipping through the books, she would place them side by side, to master the subject by thoroughly comprehending the surrounding areas. In the end, the Jade Lakes Fairy had written voluminously, filling up more than half a page, when she happily arrived at an answer. Chapter 730. The competition continues. 3. Su Luo was a step ahead of her in submitting the completed examination paper. When Grandmaster Rong Yun saw Su Luo, his thick, sharp eyebrows raised slightly. He, who had always been indifferent, unhurriedly spoke a line. Being busy for more than half a day must be really tiring, right? Other people all thought that Grandmaster Rong Yun was showing concern for Su Luo and could not help but view her in a new light. But when Su Luo heard this line, her heart trembled slightly. She knew that Grandmaster Rong Yun, who was also a space mage, had realized it. However, Su Luo raised her eyes and looked at Grandmaster Rong Yun's appearance. But she saw that his expression was the same as always. Only at an angle she could see. A trace of interest flashed across that pair of pitch-black as ink, deep eyes. In her heart, Su Luo speculated secretly. This Grandmaster Rong Yun was really interesting.
Cough, cough.
Grandmaster Rong Yun stared at her for a moment. Su Luo touched her nose, then with tail between her legs, she ran back to her group of people. Since Grandmaster Rong Yun was so magnanimous as to let her go, then she didn't need to flaunt being let off lightly. So, confronted with the Jade Lakes Fairy's provocative gaze, Su Luo's expression was calm and collected like water. She raised an eyebrow and smiled. Seated on high, Grandmaster Rong Yun examined the test papers thoroughly on the spot. Below, it was divided into 3 factions. Jade Lakes Li family's faction stood on the left side. The neutral faction stood in the middle. And Su Luo, Bei Qinying's trio, stood on the right side. At this time, the Jade Lakes Li family was immensely proud of themselves, with an air of arrogance that soared to the sky. Because, the way they saw it, Su Luo, as an elementary apothecary, had no way of beating the Jade Lakes Fairy. Of course, the Jade Lakes Fairy herself thought so too. Consequently, she stood proudly and occasionally would cast a glance at Su Luo, with traces of a sneer in them. Compared to the Jade Lakes Li family's self-confidence, Su Luo's side seemed to be lacking a great deal of confidence. Bei Qinying simply comforted Su Luo directly. It's no big deal. This is only the second round. If it's a loss, then it's a loss. Later, there are still opportunities. Lan Xian also joined the comforting procession. After all, Li Yaoyao had started learning to be an apothecary from when she was young. Sister-in-law, you've only learned for how long? So, even if you lose, that is merely an issue of time. An Yeming nodded his head in agreement. Su Luo was extremely speechless. Is this just how little faith you have in me? Sister-in-law, you should just save your grief. The 3 of them spoke in unison. Su Luo let out a snort and turned her body away. Since even Bei Qinying and the others felt she would undoubtedly lose, then, naturally, the rest of the people would also have the same thought. Su Luo unhurriedly looked towards the Jade Lakes Fairy. And it so happened that right at this moment, the Jade Lakes Fairy was also looking at her. The 2 people's pair of eyes meet. Although they had similar smiles on their faces, sparks were flying everywhere when their gazes met. Not long after, Grandmaster Rong Yun placed the 2 test papers on the table and passing, he leisurely raised his eyes. For a moment, everyone's gaze were focused on Grandmaster Rong Yun's face. Each and every one of the Jade Lakes Li family was as excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Happy rays of light were flashing faintly across their eyes. Grandmaster Rong Yun indicated to Apothecary Long, who was standing at the side, to announce the results. Apothecary Long stood in the center, his voice resonant and clear. Second round, Li Yaoyao, full marks. Wow, everyone simultaneously looked towards the Jade Lakes Fairy. The test question set by Grandmaster Rong Yun, the Jade Lakes Fairy, could actually get full marks. In this case, wasn't she going to win for sure? Unless Su Luo could also get full marks. But was there even a possibility? Everyone all felt this was definitely impossible. As a result, now, there were already countless cynical and sneering gazes sweeping over Su Luo, with cold smiles on their faces as they rejoiced in other people's misfortune. Apothecary Long had a restrained and contained expression as he silently swept his gaze in a circle over the people below. A trace of disdain flashed across his eyes. With both his hands crossed in front, his head held high and his chest stuck out, he announced the final result. Second round, Su Luo, full marks. Full marks? How was this possible? Chapter 731. Su Luo's Death, 1. Everyone below had a huge exclamation mark pinned to their foreheads as they stared incredulously at Apothecary Long. This is absolutely impossible. After Li Aoqiong heard the announced results, he immediately jumped out. Following Li Aoqiong's example, everyone issued their own disbelief in succession. How can this be possible? Isn't the Su family's girl an elementary apothecary? How can Su Luo get full marks? How can she be comparable to the Jade Lake's fairy? There must be a mistake somewhere. Definitely a mistake. Even if you kill me, I still won't believe it. Su Luo actually got full marks? Don't tell me she started to learn apothecary theory and knowledge while in the womb? In the past, wasn't she a starry-eyed, infatuated, good-for-nothing idiot? How is it that all of a sudden, she has now become one of those extremely gifted geniuses? For a moment, the entire throne room became extremely chaotic. It was a scene of whispering, spirited discussions, and noisy arguments. Because this fact was really too astonishing. Even the emperor was dumbfounded at this moment, stupidly staring at Su Luo, as his entire person sat there like a clay statue. This is the legendary idiotic and incompetent Su Luo? This is the Su Luo who was stubbornly despised by the crown prince, then had the engagement cancelled? This is Su Xian's embarrassment of a daughter birthed by a concubine? This was just the so-called amateurs watching a spectacle, while the experts saw the truth. Apothecary Long was the one who was genuinely shocked to a standstill. In fact, on the surface, Apothecary Long looked solemn and calm. In fact, his heart was even more shocked than these outright amateurs. Because, 10 days ago, all of those books were actually taken from him. Such a thick pile, there were no less than 100 volumes. Additionally, the most important thing was that inside consisted of elementary apothecary theory books, intermediate apothecary theory books, advanced apothecary theory books. This girl couldn't really have become a self-made genius from 10 days of study, could she? That girl was able to answer all of the test questions. Then, clearly, she really did learn and memorize it all by heart. But, so many volumes. It took him a full 10 years to memorize and fully understand all of them. Oh, heavens. Comparing one person with another will really cause people to die from anger. At this time, inside Apothecary Long's heart, Su Luo was totally an evildoer. Regardless of other reasons, only this point of innate gift, Apothecary Long's mind was decided. No matter what, he would get his master to accept Su Luo as a disciple. After all, such a gifted talent like this was rarely seen on this continent. Not only Apothecary Long, Bei Qinying and the others, at this time, were all looking at Su Luo with foolishly blank expressions. They simply did not know how to react. Bei Qinying's reaction was the most instinctive. Sister-in-law, quickly pinch me. He felt like he was dreaming. Dared to look down on her? Su Luo humphed twice. She then seized Bei Qinying's arm and pinched it. Ouch! It hurts, it hurts. Bei Qinying's performance was extremely exaggerated in nature. Now, you believe it, right? Su Luo had her hands crossed over her arms, looking immensely proud as she cast sidelong glances at him. I believe it. I believe it. Sister-in-law is truly awesome. You're this. Bei Qinying flatteringly gave a thumbs up. This is more like it. Su Luo nodded her head in satisfaction. At this time, Bei Qinying and the others, the three of them, looked at each other in dismay. In the end, it was Bei Qinying who issued a line that summed up their feelings. No matter who we doubt, we cannot doubt sister-in-law. Hold whoever in contempt, cannot hold Su Luo in contempt. Thinking about before, counting the numerous past events. Each time, Everyone held Su Luo in contempt. And the result was that each time, Su Luo would turn defeat into victory. Every kind of feeling, Bei Qining and them were already used to it. Lan Xian and An Yeming hurriedly nodded. This was the truth. The corner of Su Luo's mouth pursed slightly. In fact, this time, it really was coincidental. It seemed as if even heaven itself was intentionally standing on her side. Chapter 732, Su Luo's Death, 2. Seated up high, Grandmaster Rong Yun indifferently swept a glance at everyone below in the audience. His deep and lofty gaze seemed to be looking at the mass of common people. 10 days later, go to the demon cave. He stood up and saw that all the people in the audience seemed to be frozen in place. Then, he cast a glance at the Jade Lake's ferry. Prepare well. Until he left, he still did not even glance at Su Luo. As if in his eyes, Su Luo was just a tiny ant, not worthy of him seeing with his own eyes. Seeing Su Luo staring blankly, Bei Qining somewhat heart-achingly patted her slim shoulders. What are you thinking about? Bei Qining was indignant on Su Luo's behalf. His family's little sister-in-law was so good, was way better than whatever her name Li Yao Yao. Why did it seem as though Grandmaster Rong Yun did not like little Su Luo too much? Before Su Luo could say anything, Lan Xian had already stepped out, being outraged by the injustice to her. It can't be that Grandmaster Rong Yun had already selected Li Yao Yao from the start, right? Therefore, he didn't treat Su Luo so well. So seeing Su Luo emerging victorious, he wasn't too happy either. Bei Qining secretly shot a glare at Lan Xian, but he wasn't accepting of the glance and continued to shout in dissatisfaction. It's just like this. From the start, Grandmaster Rong Yun has always treated Li Yao Yao better than sister-in-law. An Yeming covered Lan Xian's mouth and secretly shot him a look. If you don't say anything, there still will be no one who thinks you're mute. Seeing Su Luo's slightly pale appearance, Lan Xian's heart paused. Only then did he become aware of the burden he had added onto Su Luo. He could not help but be somewhat apologetic. Sister-in-law, Su Luo smiled. You guys are way overthinking things. From her point of view, Grandmaster Rong Yun's manner was really somewhat unfathomable for people and hard to see through. If one was to say he was biased towards Li Yao Yao, but he clearly saw her cheat in front of everyone. Not only did he not say anything, there was also traces of an interested smile that flashed through his eyes. If one was to say he was biased towards her, but his outer manner and attitude was clearly much better towards Li Yao Yao. It really was puzzling to people. He sure proved himself to be the aloof and remote Grandmaster Rong Yun. He was so enigmatic, deep like the ocean, making it hard for people to understand him. After a thorough investigation, Su Luo pondered it, but she just couldn't understand him. Instead, she felt like she had a slight headache. Bei Qining, the three of them, thought she was distressed by the matter of Li Yao Yao being selected, and one after another, they comforted her. Bei Qining raised his fist to give Su Luo a morale boost. Sister-in-law, there's no problem. We're from the faction with strength. As long as you beat Li Yao Yao, then even Grandmaster Rong Yun will have nothing to say. Lan Xian and An Yeming hurriedly nodded their heads. The faction with strength? Su Luo laughed softly. Li Yao Yao was already an advanced apothecary, okay? As an elementary apothecary, for her to claim to be from the faction with strength in front of Li Yao Yao, this was really a bit. Su Luo waved her hand. Forget it, let's not get tangled up in this issue. Anyway, I believe in Grandmaster Rong Yun's eyesight. Grandmaster Rong Yun, that kind of variable person, Li Yao Yao's character definitely could not escape his eyes. We sure won't believe. The three brothers were sulking. They had all seen Grandmaster Rong Yun being biased towards Li Yao Yao. Su Luo laughed for a bit, then immediately asked again. That's right, what kind of place is the Demon Cave? Why is it that I've never heard of it before? At the mention of this, Bei Qining, the three of them, all had somewhat unsightly complexions. What's wrong? Frowning, Su Luo asked. The Demon Cave is where the historical remains of an ancient civilization resides. To open the cave's gate, apart from the key, you also need strength. Regarding strength, in the entire continent, naturally, excluding those from Purgatory City, The people who are able to open it can be counted on one hand. And Jade Lakesley family's elder is precisely one of them. It just so happens that the key is also in his hand. Lan Xian added and said, the inside of the demon cave is filled with all kinds of dangers. Several large powerful families all use it as a place to train their disciples. Quite clearly, the Jade Lakesley family has a detailed map of the inside. Chapter 733, Su Luo's Death, 3. On Ye Ming touched his nose. Now you know how biased Grandmaster Rong Yun is towards Li Yaoyao, right? This place was specially chosen for Li Yaoyao. Su Luo frowned. If it was really like what they said, Grandmaster Rong Yun really was very biased towards Li Yaoyao. However, she always felt there was another reason within. Grandmaster Rong Yun was not such a simple character. Speaking of the Jade Lakesley family, after leaving the Imperial Palace, Li Yaoxiang ordered people to return to the Jade Lake Palace at top speed to fetch the map his father drew before. Li Yaoyao's complexion was without worry as she sat in a chair made of red sandalwood in the hall, drinking a big mouthful of tea. Seeing this, Li Yaoxiang couldn't help but to comfort her. Yaoyao, don't be anxious. Although the last 2 rounds, you tied with that loathsome girl, but this last time, you can win over her no matter what you do. Li Yaoyao heavily threw away the teacup and said hatefully, tied. How could I, Li Yaoyao, possibly have tied with that little slut? How can she even be mentioned on equal terms with me? What qualifications does she have to be on equal footing with me? In Li Yaoyao's eyes, she was a princess that was up high. Su Luo was unworthy to even be her servant. Yet, it was delusional that she was placed on par with her. This was simply a joke. In front of her own family, Li Yaoyao was usually spoiled, willful, and completely unrestrained, completely lacking her noble and virtuous image that she kept in front of outsiders. Li Yaoxiang slapped his palms down and angrily said, just like you said, even though it's a tie, we, the Jade Lakesley family, have also lost an enormous amount of face. Second uncle, I can't swallow this insult. Li Yaoyao said angrily, you must help me get revenge. Your second uncle also can't swallow this insult. Li Yaoxiang thought of that loathsome girl having stirred up the entire Jade Lakesley family until the heavens seemed to have flipped over, and the rage inside his heart rushed upwards. Elder brother had only given birth to 3 kids. Now that Li Yaoxiang had become like this, what's the difference compared to a useless person? Li Yaoyin was completely unaccounted for, having disappeared without any news. It seemed as if everything pointed to disaster. Li Yaoyao's originally smooth marriage plans were also stirred into complete chaos by that loathsome girl. Thinking about this, Li Yaoxiang's hatred for Su Luo was deeply embedded into his bones. He slapped his palms down and angrily said, let's first not bother with others. Talk about it after we make this loathsome girl look bad. Gnashing her teeth, Li Yaoyao said, didn't you say that she's not Su Zian's real daughter? This sentence of Li Yaoyao's, Li Yaoxiang naturally knew what she was suggesting with it. Yaoyao, you want to use this hidden trump card now? Li Yaoxiang stroked his chin as a hint of contemplation flashed across his eyes. Of course, not using the hidden card, then once it expires, it will be useless. What's more, this is the last stage of exams and currently the most crucial time. If, at this time, something were to happen to Su Luo's person, humph. I want to see what time and energy she'll have left to participate in this last stage of the exam. The more Li Yaoyao thought about it, the more pleased she was, not to mention, by that time, she won't even be Su Zian's daughter. She will be a lowly person of unknown origin, with a status as low as dust. Don't need to talk about Grandmaster Rong Yun, even on the Emperor's side. Humph. Li Yaoxiang said knowingly, what Yaoyao said is right. Good, very quickly, you will see the scenario you wish to see. Very quickly, the news about Su Luo, that loathsome girl, being driven out of her family will resound throughout the entire imperial capital. At that time, she won't even be Su family's daughter by a concubine. Instead, she will be a loathsome girl of unknown origin. A malicious sneer flashed across Li Yaoxiang's eyes. Opposing the Jade Lakesley family? She must really be tired of living. Su Luo, you just wait for the Jade Lakesley family's extreme retaliation. Su Manor. Li Yaoxiang exerted pressure on Su Ziyan every day, pressuring Su Ziyan until he nearly collapsed. Could it be that he didn't want to drive this daughter that was not his biological daughter out of the family? Chapter 734, Su Luo's Death, 4. But the problem was, she had already passed 2 rounds in a row. If she passed another round, then she would be Grandmaster Rong Yun's disciple. If Su Luo was truly accepted as Grandmaster Rong Yun's disciple. At that time, even if Su Luo did not ask for favors from Grandmaster Rong Yun, the entire continent still would look upon Su Manor as very important. Grandmaster Rong Yun only needed to say the word. Then Su Manor could immediately reach the heavens in one step. Even the Jade Lakesley family must also give Su Manor face. As a result, Su Ziyan carried the heavy pressure by the Jade Lakesley family. He wholeheartedly shouldered the pressure, waiting for the results of the disciple selection before making a decision. No matter how extremely forcefully Yaoxiang's side pressured him, Su Ziyan continued to bear it, even though he was on the verge of collapse from it. It was merely that he wasn't sure if he could hold out until the end. From others' perspective, 10 days' time would pass in an instant. However, from Su Ziyan's perspective, a day dragged on like a year. Enduring and enduring, finally, Su Ziyan endured to the last round of the match. Su Ziyan sucked in a deep breath of air. Su Luo ah, Su Luo. This time, everything will depend on you. If you cannot win the 3rd round, you can just get out of Su Manor. This time, everyone did not assemble in the throne room. Instead, they came to the Demon Cave, a distance of a day's travel from the imperial capital. At this time, besides Grandmaster Rong Yun, Su Luo, and Li Yaoao, there were many others who were here to watch the spectacle. For example, Su Manor and Lu Manor. Every aristocratic and wealthy family from the imperial capital had sent representatives to watch. The entire scene was bustling and very lively. Places with many people would definitely have a lot of spirited discussions. You tell me, this time, who do you think will win? Do I even need to say it? It definitely will be Jade Lake's Fairy. Exactly, not only is the Jade Lake's Fairy's strength greater than Su Luo, in addition, you know this is the Demon Cave O. This is the place where the Jade Lake's Fairy could be considered the host, like fish in water. That may not be true. In the previous rounds, didn't you all say that Su Luo would certainly lose? However, she still staggered along and charged through. You also said that she had staggered along and charged through. However, it could be seen that she had already exhausted her abilities. What's more, the Jade Lake's Fairy hasn't used all her strength. It can be said that she was being polite and going easy on Su Luo. Right. It is definitely like this. She is giving Su Luo some points. When Bei Qinying's trio heard these people's words, they rolled up their sleeves and were about to beat them up. What do you mean by Li Yaoyao going easy on Su Luo? Motherfucker, Li Yaoyao wished she could actually throw Su Luo far away. Why would she go easy on Su Luo? They didn't know how hard Su Luo had to prepare for this exam, but Bei Qinying and the others were there to see it all. Su Luo pulled Bei Qinying and the others to a stop. She was all smiles as she said, "Don't go, sister-in-law," exclaimed Bei Qinying, unable to accept it. After the results come out, at that time, they would be slapping their own faces with pow, pow sounds. That would be more pleasurable. Su Luo unconcernedly said. Bei Qinying thought a bit, and felt that this way was also good. Seeing them slap their own faces was truly more pleasurable. These 3 extremely handsome youths fiercely glared at that group of gossiping people. They obediently stood behind Su Luo in a half-circle. Grandmaster Rong Yun pointed towards that sinister cave opening and shot Li Yaoyao and Su Luo a slight glance. Inside the demon cave, there are fire source stones. Whoever can bring out the most wins. Fire source stone? Everyone's face had a huge question mark. The price of a fire source stone was very high, but since the Jade Lakesley family could even take out purple-colored crystal stones, how hard could it be to get a fire source stone? What if somebody was to cheat? Naturally, Grandmaster Rong Yun had already thought of a countermeasure. Those fire source stones have already been marked by this apothecary. No one could pass off a fake one for the real thing. The mark was his unique spiritual signature, so even an expert stronger than him could only erase the mark, but could not substitute a fake, unmarked one for the real one. Chapter 735, Su Luo's Death, 5. When Grandmaster Rong Yun said these words, happiness flashed through the Jade Lake's fairy's eyes. Someone had already retrieved the map of the demon cave from the Jade Lake's palace and handed it to her. She had spent an entire day memorizing every detail on it. She hadn't even entered the demon cave yet, but she already knew the layout and structure inside very clearly. Su Luo, that loathsome girl, wanted to win against her? In the next lifetime. Thinking up to here, the Jade Lake Fairy cast Su Luo an arrogant glance, her eyes filled with disdain. However, Su Luo did not even take notice of her. After Grandmaster Rong Yun had said that every single fire source stone had been marked with his spiritual signature, happiness flashed through Su Luo's heart. As a result, she quickly woke up the little divine dragon who was soundly asleep in her space. She patted his little butt and told him to rush quickly to Grandmaster Rong Yun's side. The little divine dragon rubbed his drowsy eyes. However, he cleverly carried out his little owner's instructions. In 2-3 steps, he ran into Grandmaster Rong Yun's arms. His little nose sniffed him here and there. Grandmaster Rong Yun clearly showed that he did not know that the little divine dragon had a natural instinct in finding treasures. Full of affection, he rubbed the little divine dragon's head. When the Jade Lake's fairy saw the little divine dragon, her heart trembled. She coldly said, "This little bastard cannot enter." When the little divine dragon heard that he could not enter, he immediately became worried. His 2 little paws clenched tightly onto Grandmaster Rong Yun's clothes at his chest. That pair of huge, innocent clear eyes shone with a pleading light. Grandmaster Rong Yun affectionately rubbed his head. No one noticed that when Li Yaoyao had shouted out the 3 words, "This little bastard," an icy cold glint flashed through the depths of Grandmaster Rong Yun's eyes. It was too fast, so others were unable to detect it. Only Su Luo, who was secretly and carefully observing Grandmaster Rong Yun, had noticed it. Su Luo secretly felt that this was odd. Didn't know if it was her misperception, but she always felt that Grandmaster Rong Yun's treatment towards Li Yaoyao was not as good as it seemed on the surface. However, Li Yaoyao not allowing the little divine dragon to enter, this was out of the question. Su Luo coldly smiled and cast a sidelong glance at the Jade Lake's fairy. "Based on what reason is it that my little spirit pet cannot enter? I didn't even bring a spirit pet. This is not fair." In fact, it's not because Li Yaoyao did not have a spirit pet. Merely, her spirit pet was currently only at the 5th rank, so she looked down upon it. Therefore, she had tossed it aside in the Jade Lake Palace and did not bring it. The corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into an apathetic sneer. "Why should I care if you brought your spirit pet or not? In any case, I will definitely be bringing my spirit pet inside. If you have the ability, then you can also go find one." "Miss Su, how could you be so unreasonable?" The Jade Lake's fairy used a criticizing gaze to look at Su Luo. With a helpless expression, she said, "If you act like this, how could the contest proceed?" Su Luo secretly cast Grandmaster Rong Yun a glance. Afterwards, she spread out her hands towards Li Yaoyao and helplessly said, "What my spirit pet loves the most is to explore. If he is not allowed to enter, then he will be in a bad mood. If his mood is bad, then he will not eat properly. If he does not eat properly, then he will get sick. Of course, if you can prevent him from entering, then you will have the final say." Before the Jade Lake's fairy could speak, Grandmaster Rong Yun had already waved his hands. "Enough. Spirit pets inherently are a part of one's strength. Naturally, they can enter." Su Luo's heart secretly smiled. As expected, Grandmaster Rong Yun was still really concerned about the little divine dragon. The Jade Lake's fairy was displeased in her heart. However, recalling the map she had memorized inside her head, the corner of her mouth lifted into a sneer.
Begin.
Grandmaster Rong Yun said in an indifferent tone. Hearing what was said, The little divine dragon quickly rushed into Su Luo's arms, afraid that his little owner would leave him behind. "Sister-in-law, we will wait for you to come out to celebrate," Bei Qinying's trio said to Su Luo, with their faces full of expectation. The demon cave was very dangerous. Chapter 736, Su Luo's Death. 6. Originally, they had wanted to stop Su Luo from participating. After all, if something were to happen to her, they would be unable to explain it to Nangong. However, no matter what was said, Su Luo would not agree. She even brought out her good luck that had averted her from disaster every time as proof. The trio were helpless and could only allow her to go. Yes. Su Luo nodded her head and stuffed the little divine dragon into her arms. Afterwards, without any hesitation, her body moved slightly. She used spirit dance steps to skim towards the entrance of the demon cave. Seeing Su Luo's leaving figure from the back and thinking of the things Li Yaoyao brought inside, Li Yaoxiong and Li Aoqiong exchanged a glance. A smirk could be seen in both of their eyes. "Su Luo, you have already become a grave threat to the Jade Lakesley family. No matter what, this time, you must die." Su Luo was a step behind the Jade Lakes Fairy in entering the demon cave. Clearly, the Jade Lakes Fairy already had a plan. In order for Su Luo to not catch up with her, her speed rose to its peak. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared. Inside the demon cave, there was a countless number of demon soldiers, with strengths ranging from 1st rank to 4th rank. The demon soldier king's strength ranged from 5th to 6th rank. As for the demon boss, its strength was above the 7th rank. Su Luo's figure was like a thread of smoke as she swept towards the cave's path as fast as lightning. The lighting in the cave's passage was very dark. Originally, Su Luo could have easily shot out small fireballs to use as light. However, she did not do so. It was because bright light would easily attract the enemy's attention. At that time, if a group of demon soldiers came, then she would die for sure. In the dimness of the light, one could only see at most 100 meters. Within 100 meters, she simply could not see the Jade Lakes Fairy's silhouette. A cold smile flashed through Su Luo's heart. So what if the Jade Lakes Fairy had a map? Didn't she have a spirit pet that could automatically hunt for treasure? Su Luo patted the little divine dragon, whose little head had popped out from her arm curiously. Her figure quickly moved through the passage. Didn't know how long she traveled through the passageway until finally, rays of light could be seen up ahead. Very clearly, they had already reached the end of the passage. A steel door was at the end of the passage. Originally, it should have been locked up with chains. But now, it was already cleaved in half by someone else. The chains were split up into pieces, scattering on the floor. Very clearly, this was the Jade Lakes Fairy's doings. With someone ahead opening a path for her, this point was pretty good. Su Luo carried the little divine dragon and entered with light footsteps. Behind the door was a wide and imposing hall. The surroundings were absolutely empty. There was nothing, besides a whole field of demon soldiers. There was a group of demon soldiers on the floor that had just died recently, so they hadn't vanished yet. However, it was clearly done by the Jade Lakes Fairy. The reason why the demon cave was known as a hellish place was because these demon soldiers were one of the biggest factors. The demon soldiers had died without transforming, so later, they could again reform. In other words, these demon soldiers were never alive. So, no matter how you killed them, you could never kill them all, because they would die and resurrect again. But right now, they hadn't been dead for long, and so their bodies hadn't disappeared. So, Su Luo bumped into them head-on. Just at this moment, the little divine dragon abruptly emerged from Su Luo's arms. One could only see him leap out with lightning speed towards one demon soldier. He then took a bite directly out of its corpse. What surprised Su Luo was that demon soldier suddenly changed into a ball of spirit mist. Afterwards, it was sucked in by the little divine dragon. This was repeated again and again, over and over again. The little divine dragon continued to suck non-stop. He swallowed all the demon soldiers on the floor into his stomach. Su Luo simply stared at this dumbfounded, and only recovered her senses after a long while. She picked up the little divine dragon and pried open his mouth to carefully examine it. You truly are. What things don't you eat? She found that the little divine dragon's innate gift was incomparable, too amazing. Chapter 737. Suluo's Death, 7. Like her who cultivated desperately and experienced life and death situations again and again. Even then, she was still currently only at the 5th rank. However, as for the little divine dragon, he only needed to eat, drink, and sleep. Occasionally acting cute, once in a while eating a few stones, and bubbly like clouds of mists, then his strength would immediately skyrocket. The dragon race was truly the gods' favorites. This point, no one could compare to. After the little divine dragon had absorbed nearly all of the spiritual mist from the demon soldiers, his entire little body seemed to be drunk from wine. While he was shaky and swaying, he was shadowboxing. Suluo immediately became speechless. At this most crucial point, how could the little divine dragon become intoxicated? Without him, she wouldn't be able to find the fire source stones. In the end, the little divine dragon's body became askew and directly fell into Suluo's arms. His little belly swelled and sunk as he entered into deep slumber. Suluo spread out her hands. The demon soldiers on the floor were even more pitiful than her. Very clearly, they were made from the spiritual mist. Originally, they would revive after death, growing and multiplying without end. However, being sucked up by the little divine dragon, they would disappear forever. Suluo couldn't help but feel the deepest sympathy on behalf of the demon soldiers in the demon cave. She hoped that after they left, this would still be the best place for the other influential families to cultivate. She stuffed the little divine dragon that had fallen drunk into her space. Suluo's expression became slightly more cautious. Originally, with the little divine dragon at her side, he would use his shrewd senses to warn her of danger. But now, it was only her alone, so she could only be more cautious. Suluo was mobilizing the spirit energy in her body, and her body gradually became stretched taut. A strong force circulated through the hundreds of bones in her body. Suluo searched the surroundings in the entire hall for a long while, and still could not find a single fire source stone. Consequently, she went deeper into the cave. Before walking for too long, her footsteps halted, because she saw that the Jade Lake's fairy was now sitting on a swing, hanging from a curtain off a canopy. Looking down from above, her attitude was arrogant as she cast Suluo a glance. Her cold gaze carried a touch of disdain. Inside such a huge hall, the roof and the surroundings were embedded with numerous glowing black pearls, illuminating the deepest part of the hall as if it was daytime. A countless number of gorgeous, 7-colored curtains hanging from the canopy danced carelessly in the air, wondrously spry and lively. The Jade Lake's fairy sat at a high place and arrogantly looked down at Suluo. Suluo stood below with both hands crossed over her chest. Her eyebrows raised in a smile, yet not a smile, and she cast a sidelong glance at the Jade Lake's fairy. After a short period of time, the Jade Lake's fairy finally started to speak in a cold and clear voice that was full of arrogance. Suluo, did you know? I truly loathe you. The Jade Lake's fairy, who always pretended to be gentle and kind-hearted in front of others, now used a despising gaze to look at Suluo with disdain. She did not even try to cover up her loathing. Suluo smiled faintly. No problem, in any case, I also loathe you. We're the same. Jade Lake's fairy frowned and immediately followed with a sneer. Based on your insignificant strength, aren't you afraid I'm going to kill you? Suluo smiled widely. Kill me? Aren't you afraid that you would end up like Liaoqiong? Liaoqiong dropped all the way from 9th to 4th rank and had become the laughingstock of the entire continent. A bitter hatred flashed across the Jade Lake's fairy's expression, and she clenched the fists at her side. Her eyes flashed with killing intent. Very good. Since you, yourself, are courting death, then don't blame me for being impolite. Humph, don't worry. My spirit pet will also not be polite to you. Suluo smiled indifferently. She calmly looked at her in the midst of chaos. Unfortunately, at this moment, the little divine dragon was completely unable to sense his little owner's danger. He was soundly snoring inside Su Luo's space, his sleep especially sweet. Words from the real author. Haven't even written to the part where Luo Luo dies, a pity. Isn't it that every day someone would urge me to finish this? If Luo Luo died, then isn't everything finished, ha ha ha? Chapter 738. Su Luo's Death, 8. Hearing Su Luo's hidden mockery, a cold light flashed through the Jade Lake's fairy's eyes. Although she had not personally seen it, she had however heard her older brother mention that Su Luo's spirit pet had toyed with second uncle until he was running around in circles. Even though she was already at the peak of the 6th rank, her strength was still too far away from that little bastard's. Thinking this, the Jade Lake's fairy snorted a few times, and she swept a cold glance over Su Luo once again. She had a trump card in her hands, but now was not the right time. Su Luo, I'll let you live for just a few more days. The Jade Lake's fairy played with the fire source stones in her hand by tossing them around and looked disdainfully at Su Luo. Instead, her sleeve danced in the air as she quickly flew away. Su Luo secretly wiped the cold sweat from her forehead. Fortunately, she left after falling for her bluff. If they were truly to fight, without the help of the little divine dragon, the odds of her winning would be 0. However, the Jade Lake's fairy had played with 2 fire source stones, flipping them in her hands. And now she still hadn't found a single one, worthy of being the Jade Lake's fairy that had the entire map of this place. This was like taking advantage of a divine opportunity. Just when Su Luo was silently cursing her, suddenly, she noticed that the surroundings were eerily quiet. An uneasy premonition appeared in her heart. Su Luo condensed all the spirit energy in her body, forming it to automatically defend, while at the same time her gaze guardedly inspected her surroundings. Thump, 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 an orderly sound came from up front. Su Luo raised her head to look. She discovered that a dense group of demon soldiers wielding weapons was directly rushing towards her. So many demon soldiers. Su Luo's heart jolted powerfully. She turned around and was just about to run back. However, now there were also thump, thump, thump sounds of footsteps coming from behind her. The bad premonition in Su Luo's heart grew even more intense. She took a glance backward, and what she saw made her thoroughly depressed. She discovered that behind her, there was another huge group of demon soldiers rushing toward her. The 2 groups were at her front and back, surrounding her in the middle, forming a pincer attack, rendering the originally very narrow passageway blocked until it was sealed airtight. Su Luo visually estimated that when the 2 groups of demon soldiers were added together, there were at least hundreds of demon soldiers. However, why were these demon soldiers looking to find her? The image of that strange smile the Jade Lake's fairy had before she left popped up in her mind, and she suddenly understood. This was definitely Li Yaoyao's secret scheme. Getting someone else to do her dirty work. She was really smart. Rustle, wham, the demon soldiers from both sides, without distinguishing friend from foe, raised their weapons and struck towards Su Luo. In front of the demon soldiers was a formidably strong demon king. By looking at them, the 2 demon kings' strengths were at the 5th rank. Without mentioning the demon soldiers, just the spit from every one of them would already drown her. What to do? Su Luo's heart became deeply worried. Based on her current strength, how could she defeat so many demon soldiers? She really didn't know how Li Yaoyao had drawn them here. Su Luo originally thought of shrinking her stature down to make her way under them. However, seeing those demon soldiers crowding together like ants, she immediately gave up on this idea. She saw that the 2 groups of demon soldiers were about to descend on her in a pincer attack. Just at the moment when the swords they waved were about to chop down, Su Luo quickly used her foot to push off from the ground, and her figure shot forth like a fierce bullet. Her 2 feet pushed off on the smooth walls, borrowing the strength to build her momentum. All of a sudden, she shot out further, going several tens of meters away. These demon soldiers were all made out of spirit energy. Their actions seemed to have been pre-programmed, without sufficient flexibility. As a result, only after Su Luo had jumped out 100 meters away did they realize that the person was no longer there. Chase. The two demon kings brandished their glittering long swords and charged fiercely towards Su Luo. Other than being a bit slow and inflexible, the strength of these demon soldiers were all pretty good. Their speed was even weirder. Chapter 739, Su Luo's Death, 9. Within a moment, the two groups of demon soldiers assembled together to chase after Su Luo. Su Luo's feet used the spirit dance steps, traveling nimbly and quickly back and forth within the main hall. Although for the time being they had not caught up, Su Luo's heart was somewhat bewildered. Bei Qining had told her there was one characteristic of the demon soldiers, and that was to form a large group. Now, two groups had joined together to kill her. If she was seen by other groups of demon soldiers, they would definitely unite together to deal with outsiders. At that time, not mentioning 2-3 groups of troops, there was a possibility that all of the demon soldiers inside the cave would chase after her to kill her. They chased closely behind her, but Su Luo also escaped very quickly. While she was fleeing, she was also pondering countermeasures to this situation. How could she shake off these demon soldiers' pursuit? Su Luo's eyes narrowed slightly. Actually, the most important point was that she ought to figure out why the demon soldiers would pursue her so closely and not let her go. She really needed to get to the heart of this matter. It seemed as if it was only after the Jade Lake's ferry had left that these demon soldiers had arrived. Then, in the end, what did Li Yaoyao do? At that time, she had been sitting on the handcrafted swing, floating back and forth. It didn't seem like she did anything. Su Luo turned her head back to look at these demon soldiers who nipped at her heels, refusing to let go. Suddenly, her mind flashed with a bright idea, because she had unexpectedly seen when she walked past that there were several demon soldiers who rushed to the wall which had her footprints, shouting anxiously. Furthermore, they even wanted to isolate that area. How could she have left behind footprints? It was only now that Su Luo suddenly recalled it when she saw the Jade Lake's ferry. She was not paying attention to the ground. It may be assumed that she stepped on a wet spot at that time. If it was an ordinary wet spot, how was it possible that these demon soldiers pursued her so tightly without letting her go? Su Luo took off her own little shoes, sniffed them a little, and she immediately understood. Li Yaoyao, was this you trying to compete with me using celestial spirit water? Truly interesting. Now, Su Luo understood at last. The reason why these demon soldiers followed her without letting her go was because she had unintentionally stepped into a trap set up by Li Yaoyao. And that trap was precisely the celestial spirit water from Jade Lakesley family. Since the Jade Lakesley family had a map of the entire demon cave, they must have known the demon soldiers' characteristics and preferences. Then, this would have been inevitable and expected. It was no wonder. It was no wonder that in the competition this time the Jade Lake's fairy seemed to have trump cards up her sleeves. So, it turned out she wanted to borrow the hands of these demon soldiers to kill her. Such a pity. With regards to celestial spirit water, who could be compared to Su Luo? It took the Jade Lakesley family 3 years to get one bottle, but she had so much celestial spirit water that it was enough to give the little divine dragon to Bath, Indiana. Li Yaoyao could have used anything else to compete with her, yet she insisted on using celestial spirit water to compete with her. Thinking up to here, the corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into a ridiculing sneer. Since Li Yaoyao had given her such a huge gift, if she doesn't return it, wouldn't it seem discourteous of her? Su Luo was running around in the huge hall, circling it for who knows how long, until she finally made a loop within the hall. And now, following behind her were at least 5 groups of demon soldiers. Up ahead, the Jade Lake's fairy was crouching down, earnestly digging for fire source stones. She threw the demon soldiers to Su Luo, while she, herself, went digging for fire source stones. The corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into a cold sneer. She approached noiselessly, flying to a place directly above the Jade Lake's fairy. In fact, the Jade Lake's fairy had sensed Su Luo approaching, but she, who was always proud, never attached any importance to Su Luo. Therefore, She was currently still wholeheartedly devoted to digging out that fire source stone. With one more, she would have 3 pieces. And just at this second, Su Luo, who had flown right above her, took out a wash basin's worth of celestial spirit water from her space. This was all high-grade celestial spirit water. It was so much better than the low-grade celestial spirit water from Jade Lakesley family. Chapter 740. Su Luo's death. 10. Being so extravagant was something only Su Luo, this nouveau riche person, could do. One could see her holding up that wash bowl to splash it all over the Jade Lake's fairy's face. Jade Lake's fairy had initially thought that the demon soldiers would stall Su Luo, and also thought that Su Luo would not dare do anything to her. However, she really underestimated Su Luo. So, the Jade Lake's fairy, who was wholeheartedly digging for fire source stones and too busy to attend to her, was splashed with water on her entire body from head to toe. Her entire body was covered with high-grade celestial spirit water. The Jade Lake's fairy, who was drenched until she looked like a drowned rat, couldn't react for quite a while. There was actually someone who would pour water over her. Su Luo, you're courting death. The Jade Lake's fairy bellowed vengefully. However, the only thing left behind in the air was the sound of Su Luo's bell-like happy laughter. Those demon soldiers, enjoy them well. Ha ha ha. One must know, Su Luo's was actually high-grade celestial spirit water. It was much better in comparison to the Jade Lake's fairy's low-grade celestial spirit water. Not to mention, currently, the Jade Lake's fairy's entire body, from head to toe, had been poured on. Her entire body was exuding the sweet scent of spirit aura. Those demon soldiers who, originally, had stubbornly targeted Su Luo, not letting go, immediately turned their heads and threw themselves towards the Jade Lake's fairy. Seeing countless demon soldiers rushing towards her, immediately, Li Yaoyao was scared to the point of turning pale and nearly shrieked. Su Luo, I want to kill. I will definitely kill you. Li Yaoyao furiously brandished her fists, both her eyes bursting out with red light. But, no matter how furious she was, if she wanted to take revenge, she must first get rid of the demon soldiers in front of her eyes. She already had no time to ponder over where Su Luo got the celestial spirit water from. Now, her complete attention was placed on the bodies of the 5 demon soldier kings and the approximately 500 demon soldiers in front of her eyes. Every demon soldier king, at worst, had strength at the 5th rank, and the more powerful ones were at the 6th rank. The Jade Lake's fairy was merely at the peak of the 6th rank. How could she be a match for so many? The gazes of every one of these demon soldier kings were bursting with a burning radiance. They stared fixedly at Li Yaoyao's body, with gazes that were greedy and intense. Li Yaoyao was watching the 4 demon soldier kings in front of her who were hindering her. There was one final demon soldier king left over. He was clearly the most intelligent one, taking advantage of Li Yaoyao being unguarded to lick her neck. His clammy tongue slid across, immediately getting a mouthful of the sweet scent. This demon soldier king released light from both of his eyes. He was itching to hold Li Yaoyao and lick her entire body. Seeing the final demon soldier king enjoy it like that, the remaining 4 were also unwilling to give up. Each and every one of them stretched out their tongues towards Li Yaoyao's body, pouncing towards her. They didn't actually have any desire towards Li Yaoyao. What attracted them was the celestial spirit water that Li Yaoyao had been drenched with. Confronted with their vulgar actions, Li Yaoyao was frightened until she nearly fainted. She frantically brandished the spirit strength in her palm. All the spirit power in her entire body exploded out, releasing an inexhaustible killing power. Suddenly, within the distance of 10 meters from Li Yaoyao, all the demon soldiers fell down in place. However, the demon soldiers still rushed towards Li Yaoyao like the tide. If these were numerous ordinary soldiers, perhaps they would be timid. However, these were demon soldiers. They were not human, with no hearts. Why would they be scared? With regards to the attraction of the celestial spirit water, this stemmed from instinct. As a result, each and every one of the demon soldiers were insanely starved wolves, fiercely throwing themselves towards Li Yaoyao. It was just like slicing off chives after they had been cut. Another would pop up, throwing themselves at her. They advanced wave upon wave, incomparably valiant. Even Su Luo, who was hiding at one side watching this, could not help but gasp in surprise. Confronted with the demon soldiers who were like wolves and tigers, and were untiring and unafraid to sacrifice their lives, the Jade Lake's fairy, at this moment, was already pale by comparison. She almost couldn't withstand it anymore. The movement her hands made accumulated boundless spirit strength, bursting and exploding out unceasingly. Chapter 741. Su Luo's Death, 11. Confronted with her vicious attack, even though the demon soldiers were not afraid of dying, they also could not get close to her body. However, the Jade Lake's fairy's condition was quite bad. Because of the attraction of the high-grade celestial spirit water, more and more demon soldiers gathered together towards her. At a glance, she was able to see the densely packed demon soldiers surge up violently like a tide, continuous and unending. A burst of fear appeared inside the Jade Lake's fairy's heart. At the same time, she also possessed an endless amount of fury. At this time, she was itching to dismember Su Luo's body into 10,000 pieces. However, she could kill Su Luo at any time. Right now, saving her own life was most urgent. Again, the Jade Lake's fairy had no time to deal with anything else. Her hands suddenly tugged. Immediately, that white-colored outer dress, that was spry and lively like an immortal, tore with a ripping sound. Jade Lake's fairy grinded her teeth and threw this white-colored outer dress towards the most concentrated place within the demon soldiers. Weren't these demon soldiers throwing themselves at her in order to lick the celestial spirit water on her body? This white-colored outer dress was moistened with a lot of celestial spirit water. Just let them fight over it as much as they want. At this time, dressed in only a piece of white slip, the Jade Lake's fairy's complexion was a sheet of haze. Seeing that crowd of demon soldiers rip that white-colored outer dress into pieces, a trace of a very dark fierceness flashed across her eyes. If she didn't go now, then when would she wait until? Jade Lake's fairy turned around, then flew over them and left. However, her head was splashed with the most amount of celestial spirit water. This simply could not be concealed from the several demon soldier kings. As a result, the 5 demon soldier kings instantly got up and followed behind the Jade Lake's fairy. Li Yaoyao was nearly angered half to death. She really wanted to turn her head back and tell them. In fact, the celestial spirit water was poured by Su Luo. If they wanted to find it, they should go find her. However, with regards to these demon soldiers that were spiritless and had the wisdom of 3-year-old kids, what use would these words have? It was like preaching to the deaf. Up ahead was a gate. Li Yaoyao's heart was moved and a hint of ecstasy flashed across her face. As long as she entered through this black, iron gate and closed it afterwards, then these several demon soldier kings would not be able to chase after her. Thinking of this, Li Yaoyao immediately sped up. She gathered all of her spiritual strength beneath her feet, hoping she could rush inside within the shortest amount of time. However, just right at this critical moment, just when Li Yaoyao was on the verge of flying through the panels of the gate, suddenly, a bucket on top of the gate emptied over. The splashing sounds of water almost scared Li Yaoyao half to death. However, the moment she smelled that scent, immediately, her heart was greatly shaken. Su Luo, you must not be allowed an easy death. You better get the fuck out here. Get the fuck out here. Li Yaoyao touched the top of her head. Her entire person was drenched. She never thought that Su Luo would actually install a trap at this gate's entrance, waiting for her to enter, and then the celestial spirit water would once again be poured all over her body. There wasn't actually that much celestial spirit water in the bucket. It only poured onto the Jade Lake's fairy's body, while not much was spilled on the ground. The eyes of the 5 demon soldier kings behind her immediately lit up. Each and every one of their eyes were naked and red as they stared at the Jade Lake's fairy, itching to pull off all the clothes on her body. Of course, what they wanted were the clothes and not the person. How fragrant! It's too fragrant. The 5 demon soldier kings excitedly wagged their tongues and sped up to chase after Li Yaoyao. Just at this moment, a figure burst forth rapidly from behind and swept towards them. When those 5 demon soldier kings saw the person who had just arrived, suddenly, their hearts were frightened. Each and every one of them bowed respectfully and knelt down. Venerable demon boss. This demon boss was dressed all in black, only those facial features were. Both eyes were sticking out, a collapsed nose with lips flipped out. He was so ugly as to be extremely tragic, especially the skin on his face. It was black and white patches with constant movement. It looked like there were countless worms wriggling on top of it. It appeared to be extremely disgusting. At this time, he was standing upright proudly, his entire body exuding a gloomy and cold aura. He was looking at Li Yaoyao with a dark and fierce gaze. It was sharp and direct. You will strip it off yourself, or shall this king help you strip it off? Chapter 742, Su Luo's Death, 12, Li Yaoyao. The demon boss of the demon cave was higher than a 7th rank. In addition, there were the 5 demon soldier kings in front of her. No matter what, she could not escape. What to do? What to do? The Jade Lake's fairy bit her lower lip, constantly thinking of a scheme to escape. However, this demon boss, who was equipped with somewhat more intelligence, cast a disgusted look at her. Not waiting for her to respond, he took unfair advantage and directly hugged the Jade Lake's fairy by her slender waist. Following this movement, the Jade Lake's fairy's entire person became almost completely stiff. She was called a fairy. Her entire body was cold flesh with lofty, proud, and unyielding character. She avoided immorality and had never been so violated by a male before. But now, she was together with this person, very close. In addition, his face was like that of a toad's, with the sores and warts sticking to her skin, immediately making her hair stick up from a chill. Let me go. The Jade Lake's fairy smashed her fist towards his head in fury. But this 7th-ranked demon boss's strength was seriously strong. He merely raised one hand and jerked both of the Jade Lake's fairy's hands behind her back. Such an action caused the Jade Lake's fairy's soft chest to stand proudly erect. However, this, with regards to the dressed all-in-black demon boss, didn't have any attractiveness whatsoever. One could only see his hand that was crawling with countless maggots firmly grasp the Jade Lake's fairy's final piece of clothing. Don't, Dante, I beg you. Let me go. I know who has this kind of celestial spirit water on their body. I'll take you there. I beg you to let me go. However, this demon boss only had some intelligence. With regards to things, he always followed his own judgment. No matter how much the Jade Lake's fairy wept and pleaded, his hand that gave people goosebumps used force to fiercely tear. One could only hear the sound of ripping. The white slip the Jade Lake's fairy had on was immediately ripped apart. The black-dressed demon boss conveniently gave a toss. The 5 demon kings around were already salivating from waiting. Now, all of them frantically rushed towards that slip. That light-colored slip was frantically being contested. Once again, he looked at the Jade Lake's fairy. Now that her slip had been torn off, the only thing remaining was a pink undergarment, one, wrapped around her proud chest. Don't! The Jade Lake's fairy was frightened until she cried, the tears tumbling down from her face. From childhood to now, having always been treated as a princess, carefully clasped in the center of people's palm, no one had ever treated her like this. The black-dressed demon boss's eyes were as cold and gloomy as before. Even if the Jade Lake's fairy was even more pitiful and lovely, he still remained unmoved. One could only see him lean over, and from top to bottom, he started. Inch by inch, the places that were soaked by celestial spirit water were absolutely unable to escape his tongue. Looking at that extremely ugly appearance, the skin that would make a person feel sick, goosebumps started to rise on the Jade Lake's fairy's entire body. Just when the dressed-in-black demon boss's head lowered towards her lower body, A fiercely strict expression flashed through Li Yaoyao's eyes. She concentrated all of her spirit strength into her right palm and smashed her fist fiercely towards the dressed-in-black demon boss whose body was bent down. Thump! A heavy sound resounded. The black-dressed demon boss's head was smashed directly. Immediately, his body swayed and his foot staggered. No sooner said than done. Dressed in the undergarment that only covered her chest and abdomen, the Jade Lake's fairy escaped at lightning-fast speed. Her body was like lightning as she rushed out of the room, sweeping towards a distant place. Daring to attack the demon boss? The corner of the black-dressed demon boss's mouth curved into a cold and dark smirk. He stood up as if nothing had happened, and with a wave of his hand, he gave a command in a coarse voice, "Begin the chase." Suddenly one could only hear woo-woo sounds. One burst after another resounded in succession, continuously with no end. Afterwards, the entire demon cave sunk into a never-before-seen franticness. Chapter 743, Su Luo's Death, 13. A countless number of demon soldiers appeared from every corner, pursuing in the direction that the Jade Lake's fairy had left in. Su Luo, who was stealing glances from a corner, saw the Jade Lake's fairy who was now barely dressed, wearing an undergarment that covered her chest, leaving everything else bare, and being chased until she repeatedly screeched. The corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into a wicked smile. Giving you a taste of your own medicine, Li Yaoyao, you should enjoy it well. Su Luo also had not walked far, merely a distance of being behind the 5 large group of demon soldiers. There was a never-ending amount of demon soldiers that were slapped dead by the Jade Lake's fairy, while the surviving demon soldiers chased after the Jade Lake's fairy. There was basically no one to take care of the corpses on the ground. Based on the principle of not wasting things, Su Luo's movement was nimble as she gathered these corpses and placed them in her space for the little divine dragon to absorb. Su Luo unhurriedly wandered about. Not long after, the sleeping little divine dragon who had eaten until he was full came out. Su Luo saw his radiating with health and vigor appearance and couldn't help but ask, "Promoted again?"
No.
The little divine dragon pursed his little lips and shook his head. He extended his little paw and gestured for Su Luo to see, "Only got a little more." "Able to get a little more is pretty good. You should be content." Su Luo rubbed his little head, then pointed to those corpses, and smilingly said to the little divine dragon, "These are all food for you." Anything that had spirit force, the little divine dragon could absorb it. Oh, suddenly, Su Luo's eyes lit up, because she saw at the place that the Jade Lake's fairy was digging before, expose a very small stone that was emitting a blazing color of light. As expected, she remembered that the Jade Lake's fairy hadn't finished digging it out when she was splashed in the face with a full wash basin of cold water. Afterwards, it was all kinds of escaping and being chased, being extremely rushed, so that fire source stone from before was still at the original spot, with no one moving it. The little divine dragon's speed was faster than Su Luo's. Like lightning, he dashed towards it. His 2 little paws were sharper than any weapon. With a casual grab, he was able to dig out the fire source stone that was buried at least a meter deep in the ground. Afterwards, he clasped the fire source stone, and in a manner of taking credit for an achievement, he jumped into Su Luo's arms. This piece of fire source stone was the size of a hen's egg. It was a very small piece that was emitting a burning red light, so dazzling as to blind a person's eyes. Su Luo handed the fire source stone back to the little divine dragon, letting him sniff it. "Sniff it carefully. Next, we will be looking for this kind of stone." The little divine dragon used strength to inhale a breath of air, clearly nodding his head to express that he remembered this smell. Su Luo stuffed the fire source stone into her space. Afterwards, she picked up the little divine dragon and placed him in her arms. Now, she started the real reason of why she entered the demon cave. With the little divine dragon's help, on top of all the demon soldiers that were originally everywhere guarding this place being drawn away by the Jade Lake's fairy, Su Luo's speed at finding them, therefore, could be said to be very fast. 1 piece, 2 pieces. A satisfied smile appeared on Su Luo's face. Now, we already have 2 pieces of fire source stones. Don't know how many pieces Grandmaster Rong Yun ended up placing in this cave. She had walked around the entire main hall up ahead. Still, Su Luo only had 2 pieces in her hand. Before, the Jade Lakes Fairy already had 2 pieces in her hand. If this amount was used, then she would win. However, within 10 days, she didn't believe that the Jade Lakes Fairy would not be able to dig out more. Behind the main hall was a dark and deep maze, so deep as to be frightening. At one glance, you could not see the end. Su Luo hesitantly stood there, unsure if she should go in or not. Bei Qining had already warned her she had best not step foot into the maze, otherwise, she who did not have a map would absolutely not be able to walk out. But Su Luo clearly saw, in order to escape the dressed-in-black demon boss's pursuit, Li Yaoyao had flown into the maze. The little divine dragon had already searched. There was not a single fire source stone remaining within the Great Hall. Chapter 744, Su Luo's Death, 14. If she wanted to find more, then she could only enter that pitch-black labyrinth to look for them. Riches and honor could only be sought among danger. Without risk, how could one acquire gains? Standing before the pitch-black labyrinth, the corner of Su Luo's mouth formed a slight smile. Then, she moved forward, stepping inside the labyrinth. Inside the black-colored passageway, Su Luo flew by. After flying a distance of approximately several thousand meters, Su Luo finally came to a stop, because a few faint rays of light had appeared up ahead. Furthermore, by following these bits of light, Su Luo could see the scene before her very clearly. This was a place where the labyrinth's route split into different paths. Up ahead, there were a total of 6 roads. Su Luo nudged the little divine dragon. Which road to take? The little divine dragon rubbed his sleepy eyes awake and seriously examined the roads for a moment, then, at a loss, shook his head. It seemed like every one of them was the same. He could not sense any path that was special. The little divine dragon blinked his eyes, then, in the end, still shook his head again. Since even the little divine dragon did not know, then she could only depend on her own luck. Su Luo thought for a moment. In the end, she still chose the middle route to fly into. After she had flown in, before long, she became stupefied, because what had appeared before her was, once again, the same 6 roads. Since she had already chosen the middle route earlier, then she should just continue with it. Thinking this way, Su Luo also followed through with this action. On this route, the little divine dragon did not make a sound. It could only indicate that the surroundings didn't have fire source stones that Grandmaster Rong Yun had buried. Didn't know how long she had flown for, when gradually, a trace of light appeared in front. Having stayed in the dark for too long, then suddenly seeing a trace of light, Su Luo was clearly not used to it. By means of the rays of light, Su Luo could see the scene in front of her very clearly. Li Yaoyao? She was actually here? At this time, Li Yaoyao was not in the difficult situation that Su Luo had imagined. Her clothing was intact and her hair was worn in a refined coil. It was as if the incident of her being violated by the black-robed person from before had never happened. Li Yaoyao was currently crouching down, digging. At this time, in front of her, on the ground, was a pile of fire source stones. Gauging by sight, there were more than 10 pieces. Su Luo's eyes narrowed slightly. She really was suspicious about where these fire source stones of Li Yaoyao's had came from. At this time, Li Yaoyao calmly turned her body around. After catching sight of Su Luo, a cold light quickly flashed through her eyes. Didn't expect you'd still be alive. Li Yaoyao looked at Su Luo coldly. Her gaze was sinister and ferocious. This line should originally be said by me to you. Su Luo had her arms crossed as she leaned with a content posture against a column. She was all smiles as she looked at the Jade Lakes Fairy. Weren't you stripped naked by someone? Where did you get these clothes? Hearing this, The Jade Lake's fairy's complexion flushed red. No matter what, her views would not be as open-minded when compared to Su Luo's, who had crossed over from the 21st century. Regarding the incident before, she was extremely concerned about it. Su Luo, shut your mouth. Li Yaoyao, spitting with anger, glared at Su Luo. What? Since you were able to do it, why are you still afraid of people talking about it? Su Luo was touching her smooth chin, sizing her up from top to bottom. While sizing her up, Su Luo clicked her tongue several times, looking down on her. Still saying about how much you like Nangong Luyun, now? Aren't you just throwing yourself on every man you see? Su Luo deliberately distorted the facts from earlier. Li Yaoyao's complexion suddenly flushed red. A shady and fierce intent to kill burst out of her eyes. Dare you to say that again? Want me to say it again? Then I'll just say it again. What's so hard about it? Su Luo leisurely unfolded her arms, found a stone table and jumped onto it. Leaning comfortably against the wall, she then sneered and said, What? Forgotten the thing that you've done? At that time, in the Amethyst Fish Palace, wasn't it you that planned for Nangong Luyun to cohabituate with you in the same room? Wasn't it so that you could seduce him into having sex with you? And the result? He simply didn't want you. Chapter 745, Su Luo's Death, 15. Just because she liked Nangong Luyun, therefore, time and time again, Su Luo had suffered from being chased by the Jade Lakesley family to kill her. Even though she was lucky to alive right now, but that anger inside her heart, Su Luo had always kept it in mind. Since there's such a good opportunity now, how could she let Li Yaoyao go? One must know, Su Luo was someone who would never leave a hatred unavenged. And Su Luo's words stabbed straight into the deepest part of the Jade Lake's fairy's heart. She had set up everything in the Amethyst Fish Palace. In order to guarantee the result, she had even released a strong drug to incite lust. But even in that kind of situation, Nangong Luyun still immediately pushed her away. Li Yaoyao would always remember. At that time, Nangong Luyun's figure almost could not stand up anymore, but he still staggered out and left. She had already stripped naked and thrown her entire body onto him, embracing him. Yet, he used up all of his strength to cast her aside. Li Yaoyao, if you still want to be this king's little sister, then immediately relinquish your hand. Li Yaoyao, in this life, the only person this king wants is Su Luo, not you. Get the fuck away from this king. Li Yaoyao, if you want to die, then continue following. His words, each sentence, were more callous than the one before and more heartless. They were as if he was ruthlessly swinging his hand to heavily slap her face, smashing her fantasy into pieces. However, the more he rejected her, the more she wanted him, not sparing any cost at all. Li Yaoyao closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she slowly reopened them, they were already filled with murderous intent. Su Luo, right now, you still have a final bit of time. Say your last words. Li Yaoyao looked at Su Luo apathetically. A bad premonition flashed through Su Luo's heart, but the expression on her face did not change. Ha Li Yaoyao, you think that you, at the summit of the 6th rank, can beat me? Su Luo raised her eyebrows disdainfully. Since you don't believe it, then just try it. A malicious radiance flashed across Li Yaoyao's eyes. She had just finished speaking, and one could only see her shake both arms. Then, 2 creeper vines flew out from her sleeves towards Su Luo to wrap around her. Su Luo already had her guard up. Just before those 2 creeper vines burst towards her, Su Luo shot 2 flames straight at those creeper vines. The flames met with the creeper vines, yet did not hurt them in the slightest. The creeper vines shot towards Su Luo, unimpeded and without obstruction as before. Li Yaoyao's face exposed a sneer. Merely a beginner's flames? How can they hurt me? The bottom of Su Luo's heart cooled slightly. Her best weapon for battles was her fire element magic. As for the wood element, she simply had not learned it at all. Since the fire element was no good, then, she could only use the great dimensional imprint she comprehended about space. Su Luo suddenly condensed out a great dimensional imprint on top of the Jade Lake's fairy's head. However, her entire body was bound up by the creeper vines. The creeper vines were thick and solid, also tough and extremely strong. Its speed was excessively fast, immediately wrapping Su Luo up like a rice dumpling. Li Yaoyao laughed coldly. Looks like your cultivation is sloppy and quite ordinary. Just this bit of ability. What qualification do you have to fight with me over third senior brother? You think you've won? Su Luo smiled faintly. Hoist her up. Li Yaoyao coldly shouted out loud. Consequently, both ends of the thick and solid creeper vines tied themselves around the columns, immediately suspending Su Luo in midair. Go! Yet another creeper vine shot out explosively from behind the Jade Lake's fairy, towards Su Luo. Whip her face. A touch of malevolence flashed across the Jade Lake's fairy's complexion. Both her eyes exploded out with a very dark and sinister light. What she hated most was this face of Su Luo's. With regards to looks, Su Luo could never compete with her, but third senior brother's eyes were deceived by her. Aside from this face, everything else about her was unworthy of being seen. Therefore, she must first destroy this face. Chapter 746, The Final Match. 1. Then, to chop off her head, and finally, slice off her flesh, piece by piece. Death by 1,000 cuts. Thinking this way, the arc at the corner of the Jade Lake's fairy's mouth increasingly rose. However, just at the moment when that third creeper vine was about to whip Su Luo's face, I order you to break. Su Luo shouted explosively. A deeply cold dagger suddenly burst out of her sleeve, and Su Luo used mental spirit power to control this dagger from top to bottom. It cut down directly towards those coarse and thick creeper vines. This dagger's name was Yanhua. She had gotten it from the Imperial Palace's treasure storage pavilion. Ever since she got it, Su Luo never actually had the opportunity to use it. Now was actually her first time using it. It truly was worthy of being considered a most precious treasure by the Nangong imperial family. The dagger was incomparably sharp, slicing through the tough and durable creeper vines as if slicing tofu. There was a distinct noise. Those tough and durable creeper vines split apart with a sound echoing from top to bottom, leaving a clean gash behind. The dagger, Yanhua, was incomparably sharp. Su Luo quietly floated down from midair. Smiling a smile that wasn't a smile, she cast a glance at the Jade Lake's fairy. Your wood element is also merely like this. A trace of rage from being humiliated emerged from the Jade Lake's fairy's absolutely beautiful appearance. You're courting death. During the moment the Jade Lake's fairy was shouting this line explosively, her whole body's spiritual strength burst out and rushed forth. Tide-like spiritual energy moved in a wave motion around her. The Jade Lake's fairy's hands trembled violently. A deeply cold, long double-edged sword, similar to a clear expanse of water, appeared in her palm. This was a flexible double-edged sword. It was originally tied at her waist. The fairy suddenly turned the double-edged sword into an attacking weapon. Su Luo, go die. The Jade Lake's fairy shouted explosively. Pouring spirit strength into the flexible double-edged sword in her hands, she jumped up suddenly, aggressively and viciously cutting down towards Su Luo. It seemed as if she was bringing about a strength of 15,000 kilograms. In a split second, the air erupted with a sizzling noise, as if even space was shaken until it split open. Confronted with this thunderous and violent offensive as heavy as 150,000 kilograms, Su Luo's eyes narrowed dangerously. Li Yaoyao, this time, I will personally fight with you. Let's see whether there really is an insurmountably wide gap between a beginning 5th rank and someone at the summit of the 6th rank. The little divine dragon wanted to engage in this battle. However, earlier, Su Luo had already stuffed him back into her space and also told him to stay there nicely. Confronted with such a strong offensive, not only did Su Luo not retreat, instead, she stepped forward half a step. At this time, Endless spirit strength was rotating and condensing within her body, then finally surged out from her palm. Great dimensional imprint. Second layer. Su Luo's complexion was cold and one of concentration. Her hands produced a complicated seal. Finally, it suddenly exploded towards the Jade Lake's fairy. Freeze. Su Luo's hands produced the great dimensional imprint. With incomparable accuracy, she maneuvered the Jade Lake's fairy's double-edged sword that had arrived so explosively to a stop. Her evolved nothingness of space stopped it in place. At this time, that long double-edged sword was very close to Su Luo, almost piercing the space between her eyebrows. The sharp edge was only 10 centimeters away from the space between her eyebrows. However, that double-edged sword appeared to have been fixed in place by someone, forever unable to advance even 1 centimeter. Because inside that tiny piece of space in front of Su Luo, the gravity had been controlled by her. At this time, she could only control such a tiny piece of nothingness of space. It could be imagined that in the future, when her strength became formidable, she would be able to control an even larger piece of nothingness of space. Every single person she saw that she didn't like, she'd throw them into the nothingness of space. Only like this would it be called truly powerful. Unfortunately, at this time, she was still too far away, unable to reach such a powerful degree. The Jade Lake's fairy, who was flying in midair, added more strength into her hands, condensing all of her spirit strength, trying to pierce through the space between Su Luo's eyebrows with the sharp point. However, what made her feel somewhat inconceivable was that she nearly lost control over that flexible double-edged sword. Pierce, pierce, pierce again. Yet, no matter what, it just could not pierce in. The Jade Lake's fairy's complexion started to twitch. Her eyebrows nodded furiously. Just what kind of tricks are you up to? Chapter 747. The Final Match, 2. Su Luo cast her a glance. Regardless of what tricks I used, being able to beat you is good enough. Want to beat me? Dream on. The Jade Lake's fairy angrily snorted. Didn't know why, traces of a black aura was rotating around her body. The black rays of light rapidly rotated around her body, gathering into a formidable force. Very clearly, this was one of her trump cards. Mind control. A sinister sneer flashed across the Jade Lake's fairy's eyes. A scarlet tint appeared in her eyes. When she stared at Su Luo, her eyes were glowing like fire. Suddenly, Su Luo felt as if her head was hit by someone with a rod, like she was being smothered. She was dazed from the pain, and her vision was blurred and hazy. She was also very dizzy. Just when Su Luo appeared to be swaying and staggering as if drunk, the corner of the Jade Lake's fairy's mouth raised into a treacherous sneer. Su Luo, next year, today, will be the anniversary of your death. Seeing Su Luo looking like this, a satisfied smile appeared in the Jade Lake's fairy's eyes. Then, her smiling expression suddenly tightened. One could only see her 2 fists suddenly clench, stream after stream of the black light flashing through her skin. Suddenly, a mountain peak-like black object appeared above Su Luo's head, giving people the kind of pressure of a mountain pressing down, a feeling of reverence. Jade Lake's fairy held up this huge, matchless black object and ruthlessly smashed it towards Su Luo. And Su Luo, at this moment, was being mind-controlled by Li Yao Yao. Therefore, her entire person was in a daze, staggering about. If she was smashed like this, then Su Luo would definitely be smashed into a meat patty. Just at this extremely thrilling moment, Su Luo subconsciously felt danger approaching. As a result, she, who was in a daze, finally opened the door to her space. The already extremely worried little divine dragon suddenly leaped out. One could only see the furious little divine dragon launch like a missile towards that black object. The little divine dragon's defense was simple, so strong as to defy nature. He directly passed through that black object, which was deep as the sea and harder than mysterious black iron. When he was penetrating through it, the little divine dragon extended his 2 paws and violently slapped at it. The originally black object that was frighteningly hard was now no better than a wooden block. It directly became dust, falling and sprinkling the ground. The Jade Lake's fairy's pair of eyes suddenly opened wide. She had already anticipated that this little dragon would be difficult to deal with, but she never imagined that the dragon would be difficult to deal with to this degree. As a result, she stared somewhat blankly for a split second. Just when she was distracted, the little divine dragon had already shot towards her body. He extended his two sharp little paws. He directly struck at her delicate, fair, and matchless beautiful face with more than 10 slaps. The little divine dragon's claws were incomparably sharp, and his strength was tyrannical. They could not be compared to the slaps by a human hand. Slap, slap, slap. A succession of slaps made the Jade Lake's fairy fall back nonstop. She tried to resist, but from the beginning, the little divine dragon had broken both of her hands. Afterwards, both of his feet stood on her chest imposingly as he slapped her without pause. This position was comical and hilarious at the same time. However, the strength the little divine dragon used to slap her was not a bit weak. The wind from a slap flew by and would bring about a bloody mist. After throwing more than 10 slaps in a row, he had directly scratched the Jade Lake's fairy's extremely beautiful to otherworldly face to become full of bloody scars. An appealing sight of devastation. Finally, the little divine dragon very fiercely kicked her in the chest, using that momentum to do a flip in the air, and flew to Su Luo's shoulder. Due to the Jade Lake's fairy being thrashed by the little divine dragon, therefore, she didn't have the energy to control Su Luo. As a result, now, Su Luo was already clear-headed. Su Luo shook her head and gladly let go of a deep breath. She reached out to rub the little divine dragon's soft little head. This time, at the critical moment, if it was not for his help, she would have already become a meat patty by now. Chapter 748, The Final Match, 3. The little divine dragon was bouncing vivaciously on top of Su Luo's shoulders. Clearly, he was very excited. He even twirled around in a dance. Su Luo was speechless as she supported her forehead with her hand. This child had a natural foolish disposition that he shed to develop in the direction of joyful foolishness. Speaking of the Jade Lake's fairy, originally, she was already riddled with scars and being stepped on heavily by the little divine dragon. Her body was unable to suppress it, and she recoiled back. Thud, thud, thud. She retreated back 7 steps in succession before ruthlessly knocking against the wall. When the little divine dragon beat her, he didn't just cause external injuries. His accumulated spirit strength also caused her serious internal injuries. A streak of blood leaked out from the corner of the Jade Lake's fairy's mouth. However, at this time, her entire face was covered in thin lines of blood. This streak of blood at the corner of her mouth did not seem that obvious. However, the Jade Lake's fairy felt a burst of fishy sweetness rushing forth from her throat. She paused for a while, then a mouthful of blood exploded out from her mouth. One mouthful after another. She vomited 5 mouthfuls in a row. Only then was she able to stop it. The Jade Lake's fairy, who had dropped down to sit at the foot of the wall, covered her chest with one hand. Her pair of malicious and sinister eyes stared at the pair of irksome master and pet. Carrying the little divine dragon, Su Luo walked until she was in front of her. She unhurriedly crouched down, the corner of Su Luo's mouth hooking into a sneer. "You want to kill me?" Humph. The Jade Lake's fairy, with blood at the corner of her mouth, turned her face away. At this moment, losing to her made the Jade Lake's fairy feel an incomparable humiliation. Su Luo used the dagger, Yan Hua, to lift up Li Yaoyao's chin. She forced Li Yaoyao until she had no choice but to meet her gaze. "You tell me, should I kill you?" The corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into a smile that wasn't quite a smile as she unhurriedly spoke. This calm and composed attitude further infuriated Li Yaoyao. The Jade Lake's fairy sneered, "Victorious person is king, the defeated is plundered. If you want to kill, then just kill. There is no need for excess words." You think that I won't dare to kill you? Su Luo effortlessly sat in front of her, the corner of her eyes lifted up slightly. If you dare to kill me, then you'll have to be prepared to be chased to the end and killed by the Jade Lakesley family. Li Yaoyao snorted coldly. Being chased to the end by the Jade Lakesley family to be killed? Su Luo laughed happily. You said it as if the Jade Lakesley family had let me go at some point in time. Li Yaoyao, you're so naive. You think that with this, you can threaten me? Li Yaoyao's complexion flushed red. It was indeed as Su Luo had said. Regardless of whether Su Luo killed her or not, the Jade Lakesley family would chase Su Luo until the end to kill her anyway. However, killing you will immediately cause the Jade Lakesley family's crazy retaliation. Each and every one of the people in your family is a lunatic. This is truly a hassle. Su Luo stroked her chin. She pretended to appear as if this was rather difficult. How about drenching your entire body with celestial spirit water, then offer you to that person? Shut up. Shut up. I order you to shut your mouth. Li Yaoyao used both her hands to cover her ears. On the verge of falling apart, she yelled, I order you to get lost. It seemed that this had become Li Yaoyao's weak point. Having finally probed out Li Yaoyao's weak point, Su Luo stood up. Sure, I'll get lost and go bring that demon boss in here. Su Luo, you're courting death. If you really dare to do this, the Jade Lakesley family will never let you off. Definitely won't let you off. Li Yaoyao shouted towards Su Luo with such a loud voice that even the surrounding walls shook slightly. So noisy. Su Luo pretended to be disdainful as she picked at her ears. Then, she stooped down to pick up the fire source stones Li Yaoyao had left behind from before. Just at this time, a trace of fierce sinisterness flashed across Li Yaoyao's eyes, who originally had fallen apart. One could only see her leaping outside, like a sharp sword, leaving only one line behind. Su Luo, go and die. Just when Su Luo was slightly distracted, a violent blaze exploded and split open right in front of her. At this time, Su Luo really wanted to rain out curses. Would this be considered karma cycling back for the appropriate retribution? She used the spirit pinballs to smash two people from the Li family. Chapter 749, The Final Match, 4, and now, Li Yaoyao had just tossed a spirit pinball at her. It was only now that she knew just how great the power of a spirit pinball was. That earth-shattering wave of energy came to engulf her. That intense power from the sudden explosion was like swallowing the blue dome of the heavens, scattering ashes and dispersing smoke. Su Luo collided with this wave of energy. Her entire person was flung up high, then heavily thrown down. A stream of blood spat out violently from her mouth. However, this was only the beginning. A huge, frantic blaze enveloped towards Su Luo. Su Luo's entire person was trapped inside the raging inferno. She was surrounded by an endless sea of flames, and she had no way out. Speaking of Li Yaoyao, she had calculated it very accurately. Only after her body had leapt out did she smash the spirit pinball towards Su Luo. In this way, when the spirit pinball exploded, with her speed, she wouldn't be affected. She had calculated it very well. Just as she ran 100 meters away, the spirit pinball exploded with a loud bang. In that very small room, within that sealed area, Su Luo still wanted to survive? Dream on. Li Yaoyao's mouth hooked into a bloodthirsty sneer, and the speed of her feet accelerated. Since Su Luo was already dead, then there was no longer any need for her to stay here. As a result, Li Yaoyao decided to leave the demon cave immediately. In any case, at this time, she already had 3 fire source stones in hand. Since her competitor was already dead, then her 3 stones was considered a certain win. At this time, Li Yaoyao's mood was very cheerful. It could be said that she was unprecedentedly relaxed and happy. As for Su Luo, who was trapped inside that sea of flames, will she really die just like this? Quite clearly, Su Luo was like a cat, having at least 9 lives. Just when Su Luo was almost dead, burnt alive by the endless flames surrounding her, she suddenly recalled that strange piece of stone. Before, that strange spirit stone had saved her life in the Cave of Flames. Su Luo suddenly threw out that spirit stone. Just at this moment, the entire spirit stone shone with the luster of gems, didn't know how it accomplished it. Just when Su Luo almost suffocated, that spirit stone decisively absorbed the flames from the explosion until there was practically nothing left. However, even though the spirit stone had absorbed the explosion's flames in time, it was unable to stop the room from being on the verge of collapse. At this time, because of the explosion, countless stones continuously dropped from the ceiling. Su Luo stood up, wanting to escape, but realized that in every direction was a wall. Where was there still a way out? Just at this time, a huge piece of rock attacked directly towards Su Luo. Before Su Luo could react, the little divine dragon had already swatted it away with one claw. The rocks continued on, uninterrupted. Only after quite a while did it finally settle down. At this time, it was very quiet all around. Su Luo, who had been swept into a corner by the wave of energy, slowly crawled up. Wiping away the traces of blood from the corner of her mouth, she walked over with a limp towards that stone. She crouched down, wanting to pick up the spirit stone. Before she even touched the spirit stone, she withdrew her hand out of reflex, because, she realized, the spirit stone was extremely scalding hot at this time. It was very clear, this time, the raging flames from the spirit pinball's explosion were too fierce, to the extent that after the spirit stone absorbed it, that originally transparent white jade color was now filled with a fierce red-colored aura. Not to mention her hand. Even the floor the spirit stone was lying on, at this moment, was also being heated until it nearly melted. Su Luo sat quietly in front of that spirit stone with a very complicated expression in her eyes. If she hadn't had the spirit stone to save her life at a crucial moment, very likely, she would have lost her life. Li Yaoyao, originally, was fully aware that Su Luo had the little divine dragon by her side. The reason why she still dared to move against her was because of that spirit pinball. This spirit pinball was at least a 9th rank in strength. If she hadn't had the spirit stone, she definitely would not have been able to escape. However, Li Yaoyao's luck was really bad. It was simply extremely bad. Chapter 750, The Final Match, 5. When she smashed other people, she would always smash them to be promoted in rank, and it was not only 1 or 2 ranks. However, Li Yaoyao nearly killed her with explosion. If it was not for that piece of weird spirit stone, she would have already died. Su Luo discovered that her lifeline was really long. Now, at the northwest side of the demon cave. This place was the cave's exit. However you entered or exit, you must pass through here. In front of this place was an area of open space. Now, it was filled with masses of people. Grandmaster Rong Yuan was sitting on a spacious chair made out of red sandalwood, the corner of his white robe draped down to the floor. It was like a blooming snow lotus flower, pure, holy, and noble. His pitch-black as ink eyes were narrowed slightly, revealing a proud and exceptionally sharp point, such that people did not dare to look straight into them. That matchless handsome face was profoundly mysterious, with one hand placed on the armrest of the chair. His fingers moved up and down, beating out a rhythm. No one knew what he was thinking right now. Emperor Jing was also sitting on a circular chair made out of red sandalwood. He was dressed in a bright golden dragon robe, making him even more conspicuous, imposing, and respectable. Only, no matter how he tried to maintain a dignified expression and posture, compared to Grandmaster Rong Yuan, he naturally appeared shorter by a length. Li Yaoxiang was also sitting on a circular chair, only, with regards to the other two, his position was slightly slanted. His eyes now had just narrowed, staring fixedly at that soul exit. Being subjected to Su Luo, that loathsome girl, he was motivated to let Yao Yao secretly take the spirit pinball that the Li family had collected for a long time. Wait until a suitable opportunity, then kill that loathsome girl with an explosion. Li Yaoxiang was not a bit worried about Li Yaoyao's strength. He was only worried about that startlingly freakish luck of Su Luo's. The fists in Li Yaoxiang's sleeves clenched even more tightly. He hoped that the spirit pinball would blow up Su Luo, and he'd rather not have her smashed to being promoted a rank. As long as you came out from that gate with many fire source stones in hand, then they could become Grandmaster Rong Yun's disciple. Li Yaoxiang's expression was stretched taut. Grandmaster Rong Yun's disciple represented many things of significance. If Yao could get this qualification, then the Jade Lakesley family would be linked together with Grandmaster Rong Yun. In this way, then, among the 10 great powers on this continent, the Jade Lakesley family's originally unremarkable position would absolutely leap up to distinguish itself. This position was truly too important, absolutely could not tolerate a loss. Yao, for this day, the Jade Lakesley family has waited for many years. By all means, don't let us be disappointed. Li Yaoxiang took a deep breath. As much as possible, he suppressed the restlessness in his heart. Now, standing by Li Yaoxiang's side was Li Yaoxiang, whose lips were also tightly pursed. His face was stretched taut. It could clearly be seen how nervous he was and how much he cared. Because he had fought Su Luo before, he knew perfectly well that her strength wasn't strong. But she could always avert disaster at the last moment. Therefore, his heart would inevitably be anxious. Compared to Li Yaoxiang and Li Yaoqiang, the other people from Li family were full of confidence in Li Yaoyao because they had always worshipped Li Yaoyao. These people that were present, their confidence in Li Yaoyao was far greater than with regards to Su Luo. Only the several people with Bai Qinying's group had firm confidence in Su Luo. They didn't necessarily believe in Su Luo's strength, but with regards to Su Luo's luck, they firmly believed it without any doubt. Sister-in-law will certainly win. If she doesn't win, then it won't make sense. Bai Qinying's smile was as brilliant as sunshine. What does Li Yaoyao count as? This fight is as a contest of real strength. Sister-in-law will definitely win. Lan Xin nodded his head with an air of complacency. An Yeming speechlessly looked at these two shameless believers. When comparing strength, he was really worried for Su Luo. Just at this moment, that cinnabar red door had spirit power hovering on it, the door that had been sealed all along. Chapter 751. The Final Match, 6. It issued a strange sound. Creak. The door quietly opened. The countless number of people's attention were concentrated upon those purplish-golden-colored gates. A slender figure unhurriedly walked out from inside. One could only see her dressed in a white long skirt, like a fairy that didn't belong in the human world. Her attitude was lively, with dance-like movements. She walked out like this, but a piece of black cloth was placed over her face, nearly covering most of her face. Even though it was like this, everyone still easily recognized her. The Jade Lakes Fairy. Don't know who shouted it first. Oh heavens, it really is the Jade Lakes Fairy. The Jade Lakes Fairy came out first. Like I said, how could Su family's daughter of a concubine even compare to the Jade Lakes Fairy? The countless number of men who revered the Jade Lakes Fairy as a goddess now cheered and shouted. They seemed even happier than if they themselves had been victorious. When Li Yaoyao acted as if deserving so, she walked by the several people in Bai Qinying's group. The corner of her mouth hooked in a sinister, sweet, and insincere smile. Afterwards, she turned around to leave. Bai Qinying glared at her leaving back. For a long time, he didn't return to his senses. Just now, that glance from Li Yaoyao contained a deep meaning. Why is it that my heart feels somewhat nervous? Lan Xin pointed to his own chest area. If he didn't say anything, then fine. But since he said it, it immediately made Bai Qinying's heart have a bad premonition. His thick, sharp eyebrows nodded slightly and gave a cold, loud shout. It's not like coming out early will win, why shout? Worthy of being the president of the mercenary union in Eastern Ling Empire, when he stiffened his face and coldly shouted, he had an imposing aura worthy of respect. Under Bai Qinying's cold yell, those people dared to be angry, but didn't dare to speak. Indeed, They had to exercise a lot more restraint. Li Yaoyao glanced at Bei Qining lightly, her mouth hooked into a profoundly mysterious cold smile. It's not like everyone can come out, President Bei Qian. Bei Qinying's heart suddenly became uneasy. He glared at the Jade Lake's fairy, eyes shooting out with lights of frost. What is the meaning of your words? The Bei Qining right now, how was he still Su Luo's sonny, adorable boy next door? He looked remarkably like the living Grim Reaper. The meaning is exactly what the words mean. The Jade Lake's fairy thought about Su Luo's appearance while dying horribly through the explosion. Immediately, her heart was greatly pleased. Li Yaoyao, you'd best say the words clearly. Bei Qining took a large step forward. With one move, he grabbed Li Yaoyao by the collar and lifted up her entire person. Quickly speak. Bei Qinying's eyes exploded out with a dangerous light. His complexion was so gloomy that water droplets could be squeezed out. Bei Qining, what are you doing? Quickly put Yaoyao down. Liao Qiang, seeing his younger sister being bullied, directly hit Bei Qinying's arm, attempting to force him to let go. However, clearly, he had forgotten the matter of him being dropped to the 4th rank. Bei Qining was so furious that he directly waved his hand. Get lost? As a result, the pitiful Liao Qiang, without any power to resist, was waved aside by one hand. He flew out very far and finally heavily dropped to the ground. He nearly passed out from being thrown. The pitiful Liao Qiang, originally, how insufferably arrogant was he? Now, he had fallen to this degree. At that time, Grandmaster Rong Yun, not destroying all of his cultivation, didn't know if it was because it was to let other people humiliate him. Li Yaoxiang, seeing this, immediately became fuming mad. Bei Qining, let go. Li Yaoxiang had his hand pressed down on Bei Qinying's shoulder. However, before waiting for him to make a move, Elder Bei Qian had his hand pressed down on the Jade Lake's fairy's shoulder. Afterwards, he raised an eyebrow and threw a smiling glance at Li Yaoxiang that was not quite a smile. Elder Bei Qian's meaning was very explicit. You dare to move against Bei Qining, then I dare to choke Li Yaoyao to death. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.